Good morning and a very warm welcome to today's exclusive SDI member event on disaster recovery. We put our programme and topics of events together at the beginning of this year and could never have predicted that we would be delivering this event in the midst of a global pandemic. COVID-19 has and is changing the way we view the world and the world of work. Businesses turn to IT to help in its hour of need, and IT service teams have been crucial in enabling the decentralisation of the workforce and ensuring products and services were accessible to staff whilst firefighting like never before. Businesses are demanding that IT accelerate roadmaps for app and infrastructure modernisation, a high-performance network, high availability architectures, automation for speed and reliability, and cloud for scale and flexibility. Most organisations that have general business recovery plans that address the immediate response to an event that assumes a return to normal operations after several days or week. Unlike extreme weather or IT disruptions, pandemics last 12 to 24 months. The global COVID-19 pandemic, the first in 10 years and only the second in 50 years, will bring permanent changes to society and business. As IT gears up for the new norm, I'm really looking forward to hearing from today's speakers about how disaster recovery and resilience can support organisations through this pandemic and what lessons we've learned so far. I'd like to say a big thank you to Freshworks for sponsoring today's event, and our agenda for today is as follows, and you should be able to see this on your screens. We have 8 unique presentations from speakers with a breadth of knowledge and experience from a wide range of industries. There's plenty of opportunities for you to ask questions during today's presentation, and we built time into each of the end of the sessions for Q&As. Just post your questions in the question function and I'll ask the speakers the questions at the end of their presentation. It's great for our presenters to know that people are out there and listening, so please ask away and be part of today's event. I'll share the questions anonymously too, so if anyone is feeling uncomfortable in asking a question, that should help. Before I introduce Beth, our first speaker of today, I'd just like to take this opportunity to share details of SDI's upcoming Proactive Problem Management course on the 26th of November. This is a virtual training course for those new to or looking to improve service problem management in their organisation. If you'd like more information on this course, please email hello@sdi-e.com or visit our website. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Beth Coleman, founder of Catalink, our first speaker for today. Beth's presentation is Preparing for Real-World Disaster, Building Your Scenario. So we're just going to swap over to Beth, and I'd like to welcome Beth to our event today. Good morning, Beth.
Good morning. Thank you.
How are you?
And it's great to be here. Really excited about being part of this.
Brilliant.
What a wonderful opportunity to join the others. And thanks for welcoming me in.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. We can all see your screen now, Beth, so over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a consultant in knowledge management. I'm working right now in New Zealand. My business is based in New Zealand, but I work worldwide, and we offer consulting as well as knowledge management training. And I've been visiting SDI a few times since I started with the presentations, so it's really nice to get back in touch with the members. I remember meeting some of you when I was there in London in 2018. So I'm going to start with prep for real-world disaster. Ooh, that's a tongue twister. Building your scenario. The reason I wanted to bring in a scenario for this is because over the last year, I've discovered that scenario building really assists in designing resilience for teams. and I've discovered a very good one that I'm going to present today, as well as go through a little bit of a simulation overview. But before we do that, I'll just get on with the agenda. So we'll start with an overview of intelligence forming, which is one of the training sessions that we offer, which is available through our Catalink website. Intelligence forming is a way of connecting people with work more effectively. And it is related to knowledge-centered service, which is another methodology, where intelligence forming is a framework and it's quite open to design. So we'll talk a little bit about that as a starting point, because that was really the beginning and inspiration for me in looking further into disaster recovery. And I'll tell you a little bit about that journey. Part of the journey included meeting some great people here in New Zealand who have been dealing with disaster recovery over the last couple of years. As you know, we've had some significant events here, and these people have designed some wonderful tools to assist people in getting through disaster and recovering effectively. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, as well as go into the MarsLander simulation, which you may or may not have heard of. It's a very powerful simulation that takes people through an experience of being in space and taking a group of people into space, as well as landing on the moon and designing the capture of data from which that Mars lander is sending information back from Mars to the Earth for sale. It's quite a fun and very engaging simulation. We'll talk a little bit about it and you'll get a chance to see some of it. But I am going to bring in the concept of evaluating value. And that is one of the leading things around KCS in terms of knowledge management and around intelligence forming in terms of evaluating the value we're adding as we deliver services using those methods and frameworks. And so I'm going to bring it into the schema, I guess you could say, of the MarsLander simulation and how we might apply it on a more general level. Of course, considering knowledge, but it's not the focus of this presentation. Right, so we'll just talk a little bit about intelligence forming, which is basically a framework that involves the improvement of collaboration with tools to align work with the right people. So in the world of service management, we can shorten the cycle of moving a ticket or an incident from one person to another by creating a collaboration-based process. And that process is designed to enable a speedier delivery of information to various people who would be able to serve as based on their skills more quickly and to collaborate with others at the same time in order to achieve faster response in a request situation. But in a high incident or high priority incident situation, it's really effective. And organizations who look at intelligence forming are usually ready to consider creating support as a network and designing a new way of working between agents who might originally have been in tiers, and moving from a tiered experience or a tiered delivery system to a collaboration one. And support networks often have to be supported by technology. So the technology that we're talking about here is tools that will allow us to see what's in the ticket and match the ticket to the skills of people who are receiving them, which means you have to have a really good skills base. And also you need to have accurate information in the tickets. Very important to create the ability to see both at the same time. So it's important to have good data in your tickets or in your requests, as well as a seriously good, deep view of people in the organization. And then as a result of that, you can align work with the right people. And of course, it increases efficiency and lowers operating costs as a result, as well as increasing skills transfer. So as we move through this online world of virtual engagement, ideally we want to increase skills so that people can take on more work that's of diverse nature and also go further into the domain of their expertise. And while we're doing that, we want to capture that information so that we know who's who and what they know. And so it's really about identifying those tools that will allow us to do that. And intelligence swarming is in a process of developing that. And there are lots of vendors who are looking at these things, but there is no one way. As a result, it's quite innovative. And as you increase your ability to move from a tiered support system to a collaboration one, you may find tools that will assist you. But there is no one tool and no one way of doing this. So, out of my interest in collaborating and improving collaboration in the intelligence swarming sphere, I've discovered a few things that I think have been very helpful and assist people, especially in high priority situations where they're under stress and they need to have a little bit of a look at how they're doing individually and as teams. And as we all know, when you're under serious stress, it's hard for the organization to get the best from you, as my consideration is really about how do I work and perform in a remote location like New Zealand that is actually dealing with disasters. So we've had volcanic um, explosions in the last year. We've also had the Christchurch earthquakes over the years, and I have had the opportunity to meet some very amazing people who have worked in disaster recovery here in New Zealand. One of these people has written a book, or a companion, that has enabled people to understand how they can work more effectively to retrieve things as they go through disaster, to retrieve and recover. And the disaster recovery companion, the companion through chaos, is one of those tools. One of the key people who's been involved in that is Elizabeth McNaughton. Elizabeth collaborated with two authors, Jolie Wells and David Lalamont, to write this companion. And in it, it gives you an opportunity to understand how they gathered information from over 100 leaders who were involved in recovering and have shared their stories there. So when I discovered this, I also had a great opportunity to meet some other people who have been working in disaster recovery alongside Elizabeth and had a chance to really see what's going on within that sphere. Her work was quite amazing to me because she did so much research to understand the intent behind why we need to recover and what tools would be there to assist us. And she told me a story that really rung true with me, and that is that many people who go through the disaster recovery process as leaders and as teams can get burnt out. And the reason that they might get burnt out, excuse me, is because they don't have the right tools to process what they've been through, and they don't have the right ways to reflect on and discover what they might do later, second time, and also to recover their own inner energies. So I was quite interested in how this plays out and discussed with her how she's developed it. One of the things she's developed is a set of cards that are aiming at making a person more resilient. And one of the reasons that I enjoy this card deck is because you can use the card deck with people in your family and you can do a review of where you are in the current state and where you want to go in terms of getting a recovery of all your resources after going through a disaster. It's a very valuable tool for moving a person or a family or a group or a team through that process. And I have the list of the material later on in the deck, in the slide deck, so you can look at that. And also, I recommend you go to the website and have a look. So the insights that are shared by this group are so honest and personal and brave. that they've resulted in further work. And this group is now collaborating with a learning lab in Christchurch and developing a course as well that can be delivered to help people get through this process using the cards and other materials. And I highly recommend it. Now, when we look at what we're doing around this, we need to have some excitement around it as well. And one of the reasons that I'm looking at this MarsLander simulation is because it is exciting, it gets you excited and engaged with others, and it gives you a very big challenge in how to deal with a disaster or a potential disaster. In the MarsLander simulation, we're going through a process of understanding what the disaster might be, assessing the value of all of our assets, including knowledge, and understanding a big picture view of what the other teams in the organization have on their work plate and on their future plans so that we can better understand what our initiatives need to take into consideration. And so the tool gives us the opportunity to test all of this out and work together to overcome some of the issues that are put in front of us. And the decision-making process that we make over the period of time, or that we design over the period of time of the simulation, enables us to grow a better perspective on how we would work when we go back to the workplace. So in the objectives that I've set out for the simulation in most of the time I've been working, it's been primarily around service performance transparency. The ideal being that everyone can see what others are doing in the organization who are associated with the service that we're delivering, understand what their projects are and how they're moving through that process of getting resource from other parts of the business and how they're competing with us in that process so that we can actually determine where we need to negotiate and barter, in a sense, for those services in order to achieve our results that we are aiming to achieve. It also looks at the goals associated with service performance transparency, understanding where there may need to be advanced tools to assist us to get the information up and more visible to others so that we can see what's going on with service performance. The other one is the strategic value of the service desk. Where that comes in is as part of the simulation, there is a large effort to understand what's going on with the service desk, the issues coming in, and of course, the service desk has knowledge articles that they are able to share and create and share with other groups, and are now moving towards making more channels available for the use of knowledge. That's kind of my space, so I really liked the idea of bringing the strategic value as one of the objectives from my simulation. I also wanted to bring in some of the other elements around this, which are part of the outcomes that you might achieve if you were going to do this simulation and you wanted to experiment. One of the things that you might look at would be some of the other methodologies that you have applied in your organization, such as ITIL 4, Agile, Lean, and DevOps, and how you are actually able to perform in a real world scenario with either of those or all of them. What can you use from your suite of tools that you've either been trained on or certified in order to understand how you can work more effectively in making decisions in a dangerous situation or a stressful situation with some serious high priority incidents coming in, and also make use of those tools in a remote situation. So when you do this simulation, you're doing it in a remote collaboration. There is an in-classroom version of it, but this particular one I'm talking about is a remote collaboration. So ideally, we would get experience and understanding of how to be more effective with collaboration in a remote scenario. So I'm just going to give you a sample of what this looks like by showing you a little video capture of the very opening of a MarsLander simulation. And we're going to use Paul Wilkinson is the facilitator. We're going to use a film clip of one of his presentations. So you'll hear that now. Oh, shoot. So in the MarsLander simulation, everyone has a chance to participate and the roles can change, which is one of the great things about this tool is that you can bring in various people from your organization as part of the team, and then they can move over to other roles to get an experience of what the other teams would normally do in a work scenario similar to the one that is in MarsLander. As well as getting a sense of what it would be like to be managing the rocket in space on all its phases and what things to look out for in terms of a potential disaster. So all of the simulation activities do take into consideration risk and the ability to understand what is coming and how to define what we will do with decision management tools. So everyone has to be agile, but also has to have very good transparency of what's going on throughout the process. And this is done with cards. So as they move through the scenarios that you see here, and each of these sprints takes them through a different round, they get a chance to understand a little bit more of the overall mission and how they play into it. And over a period of the rounds, they become more skilled. All the teams become skilled at managing and understanding risk associated with the decisions they're making. So in a disaster recovery scenario, it's really excellent. Each of the different groups has the ability to look at a flight plan and the operations associated with it, as well as other agreements that they might have with external suppliers, any mission goals that are underway and or have been established for the mission, and all the risks associated with targets they've set. In other words, they're definitely planning and designing a very high risk process, which needs to have input from lots of different groups, including third party, as well as sharing knowledge across all of that so that everyone can see what is going on and who can see what. So MarsLander is a significant opportunity to start practicing risk assessment. An understanding that is important in every organization who's now having to deal with our virtual world. So we need to understand how to prioritize the risk of the loss of a service or asset and what that would mean to us. We also need to determine what needs to be done to restore it. So before we make decisions, we need to look at the risk of losing that service or asset and where we need skills to determine what is to be done, and secondly, what can be done if we have to restore services if we lose them. So the skills again comes into play, and that's very important here. Understanding who has what skills in the group, where those skills are being used, and what tasks they have ahead of them. And then who is the leader making decisions for that group, and how do we communicate with that leadership across our work and how we have objectives we have to meet. So there's negotiation, and there is a little bit of bartering in the game. To achieve your own results as your team, you need to see what others are doing, and you need to be able to negotiate when your work can be on the schedule. So there is quite a bit of work across teams, and we do that with those cards, and also we work with a board and move those around so that we can see each other's work easily. So again, this is about ensuring service performance transparency from my point of view, but you might have a different point of view of how you would approach this this mission. And you can see that it can take uh, various angles. You might decide that you want to look at it from a release stages point of view, or you may be interested more in what kind of issues that are coming in on specific aspects of the program. So it has depth. Each of those phases that you go through, or the rounds that you go through, has the option to bring in different people. And so you also get a chance to see what's going on in those groups and take advantage of the views that are available in the board. You can go and search and see what each of them are doing, as you would need to do in a virtual world that we're in now. You could do the same with a virtual board. So it gives them practice on working in virtual boards, as well as collaborating around those, moving things around, and sharing and understanding the channels for communication there. So this is what the board looks like, and ultimately you can drill down into each of these cards and understand what's being done in the board. This is showing you from a point of view of what's currently happening, doing, done, and understanding who's doing what and how we need to build our process in place to enable our goals to be achieved alongside all of these. So assessing value is pretty important in this, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's worth looking at for disaster recovery. Um, we also need to look at it from a point of view of assets, and my asset, of course, is knowledge. So I like to look at it from the point of view, what knowledge do we need? What does that knowledge do? What's the value of that knowledge asset, and who is using it? And understanding how I can measure that across this group in the simulation. Also, the business impact of losing that asset and how it could be lost. So I'm determining what needs to be put in place not to lose it, and also understanding how I can be protecting it. As a result of the simulation, we get a lot of feedback on understanding what people need and what they're valuing. All of these simulations are designed to bring the goals and objectives of the organization into it before we start. So most of the time, there is an analysis in advance, or almost every one of these. There's an analysis to discuss what the objectives are and goals, such as the scenario I put forward, before getting started, so that we achieve all the results we want to achieve in terms of people understanding those things and getting value from the session. So it's partly done in a two round session. It can be 2 modules of 2.5 hours or 3 modules of 2 hours. And it's bringing people together digitally through virtual environments. So it's possible to make that virtual across a large time zone span. Up to 10 participants. I believe sometimes they've gone to 12 participants. Starting with 7 is a good number. And basically, it's all done online with digital. So here's some information on upcoming workshops that we offer, as well as the MarsLander simulation with Paul Wilkinson. We will be offering that in London time, and really all you need to do is get in touch with us and we can coordinate a time for you if you're interested in bringing a group along and testing it out, as well as a very good substantial discount for SDI members. The KCS Practices Workshop coming up in November is a 4-day, 3-hour each day. So it's up to 15 hours, a total 15 hours course that enables you to then get practices training so that you can take the exam. And that is a very interactive, deep practices workshop that gives you all the tools that you might need to go ahead with setting up a KCS practice. The overview is lightweight compared to the practices, but it does go into enough depth to give you the ability to articulate what KCS does, the value of it, and to begin designing and planning for your beginning your business case and possibly adoption plan, depending on where you are in your maturity stage. It is also really good for getting a refresher. So if anyone wants to get up to speed again on version 6 for KCS, the overview is a great workshop. So also the intelligent swarming workshops are available virtually and generally are done in-house with groups of people who are working on moving from the tiered to the collaboration model and are interested in understanding what they need to do to get started with intelligent swarming. It's then followed by a design workshop, which we can offer as well. So those are some of the workshops we offer. I'd just like to thank you for coming along to this presentation. It's been very important for me to get a sense of disaster recovery through people. And I can't say enough about the people I've mentioned here in understanding how to create tools that are very useful for people to get to grips with the change that's going on and all of the scenarios needed for giving people experience across a range of skills in a way that gives them some excitement and engagement, hands-on engagement, working together to get results. So at this stage, I'd just like to ask if you have any questions about the material presented, and I can also go back into the material a little if you'd like.
Hi Beth, thank you very much for that presentation, and that was really, really insightful. And just to let the audience know, just a quick apology. I think some of you may have had some slight problems listening to Paul's video, so we will make Beth's presentation and Paul's video available post this event on the event page, so you'll be able to hear it for those of you who had problems. But thank you very much, Beth. There is actually a question, and you talked at the beginning of our presentation really about the need for effective collaboration, when we're all working in a remote scenario as part of disaster recovery. I think at the moment it's fair to say that, organisations have disparate teams. We're all working remotely in scenarios and situations that we haven't experienced before. Kind of based on your experience, what are your kind of top tips, I think, for effective collaboration when people are working in disparate teams and remotely?
One of the key things that I find useful is planning, very good planning, giving
Okay.
yourself enough time to understand what the team needs as a goal from the session and identifying the correct tools for it. There are some really great tools right now that allow you to engage people more, such as breakout rooms in some of the tools, as well as seeing boards that you can work on, such as we saw in the simulation. Certainly, it's worth looking at those as a means to help people engage more and bring people into the conversation. Ideally, it's better to have the visibility of everyone in the room at least once so that everyone can see who each other is. And if you have the bandwidth to do that over the period of time that you've got people in the workshop, making sure that you can see that people are engaged or not, and bring in some topics that are going to engage them and give them an opportunity to participate. That's the whole thing is around participation, where they can engage to make decisions together and understand things in a way that allows them to collaborate on those decisions.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much. I think that's the last question, Beth. So thank you very much for today. Thank you for joining us. It was a brilliant presentation, and as I say, we'll make that available to everybody after the event. So thank you on behalf of all the audience today, and we look forward to seeing you at another SDI event soon. Thank you very much,
Thank
Beth.
you, Tessa, and thank you very much, Emma, too. Very nice to be here. Looking forward to hearing the others. Thank you. Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Lovely, thank you very much. So now we have our next session for the day. So it gives me great pleasure actually to introduce a duo of Simons to the next session. So we're very lucky to be joined today by Simon Johnson, who is General Manager of Freshworks, and Freshworks have sponsored today's event. And we're also joined by Simon Sheridan, who's Product Manager at Citizen Advice. Now, they'll be sharing a story of how Citizen Advice have successfully leveraged a service desk to drive service continuity. I think you're both there, Simons, are you?
We are indeed.
Good morning.
Thank you. Can you just tell me which screen you can see at the moment? Can you see the Freshworks presentation screen?
I can see the screen with disaster. I just need to disaster recovery with both your names and the picture of people looking at laptops. That's the one I should be seeing. Yes, is that the right presentation?
Excellent. Yes, all good.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Tessa. Good morning, by the way. Great presentation just then. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Fabulous. Right, I'll hand over to you guys. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be invited to the session today, and I think we've got a really interesting topic and a very interesting speaker to join us and to help us through this topic around disaster recovery. So just double checking sound check. It sounds it sounds like everything's okay. So I'll push on, but do let me know if there's any audio issues.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the subject today then is disaster recovery, and we've brought in a big customer of Freshworks, which is Citizens Advice. In a digital age characterized by emerging technologies, the gap between physical and digital workspaces is actually getting thinner by the day. Technology has consistently paved the way for employees to perform their jobs effectively, from facilitating access to work environments to expediting productivity, increasing the speed of business, and fundamentally changing the way that organizations and their workforce interact and transact. And of course, COVID has seen a huge acceleration of this phenomena. Today, we'll be focusing on one aspect of this phenomena, which is disaster recovery, not just in the new world, but obviously it's been very much heightened over the past 6 to 9 months. And of course, what this really means for the hugely popular Citizens Advice service offered across the entirety of England and Wales. The core themes, of course, incident management, problem management, disaster recovery process, and of course, service continuity. So quick intro. So my name is Simon Johnson. I may well have met you or spoken to many of you in the past, and I'm the GM for Freshworks, based in the UK region. I actually joined Freshworks about 6 years ago with the remit to set up our European operations. So I was the first person in Europe, and obviously back then things were very, very different indeed. And over a 6-year period, we've gone from a small startup out of Chennai, South India, into very much a very fast-growing scale-up organization with over 3,500 staff now globally. Obviously, both of these entail very different leadership styles and motivational strategies to keep my teams growing and keep them happy and engaged. For those of you who don't know, Freshworks specialise in developing omni-channel customer engagement products for the modern mobile workforce, and we've really seen an acceleration of this over the past 6 to 9 months, such as Freshdesk for external customer support, Fresh Chat, Fresh Caller Telephony, Fresh Sales CRM, and of course Fresh Service, which we're mainly focusing on today, which is our popular ITSM platform. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to be joined today by Simon Sheridan of Citizens Advice. And actually it's quite special for me because I've known Simon for many years now. He was a very early fan, I guess, of Freshworks nearly 4 years ago, actually about 4 years ago. So it gives me great pleasure to see that both Freshdesk and Fresh Service are used extensively throughout the Citizens Advice organization. Simon, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Good morning, by the way.
Good morning. Good morning. I hope you can hear me. So yes, I am a product manager at Citizens Advice. There are a few of us there, but I look after the cloud and SaaS infrastructure for Citizens Advice. Both of these platforms fall under my remit. I have about 25 years experience in IT, 20 years in senior management and product development, and I'm passionate about the customer experience, automation and delivering value. Just to give you a little bit of background about where we came on board with Freshworks, we were an early adopter of Freshdesk and Freshservice. We installed both of those around 4 years ago. We have 360 agents across both platforms, and we are heavily committed to delivering our customer service and our support service through those two platforms. A little bit of history about Citizens Advice. Citizens Advice, the one across the UK that, or England and Wales, that most people will be familiar with, is a series of 272 charities, autonomous charities, and the organisation that I work for is a national organisation that facilitates and supports those charities. So the organisation I work for doesn't interact directly with the general public other than through our online presence. We support all of those charities that do that amazing work in the community. That includes around 27,000 staff and volunteers across the network, and we at the national organisation have about 1,000 staff that support those.
Perfect. Thank you very much. You definitely got your work cut out, I feel. So let's push into the Q&A then, and let's sort of get to the bottom of your journey and the story, and specifically focusing on disaster recovery. So just to get us up to speed then, Simon, can you talk us through your journey with Freshworks so far, but maybe just, you know, as a technology stack rather than a vendor?
Absolutely. So I think I'll focus today mostly on Freshservice, but just to tell you why we have both systems. So we support our network of charities as a customer service, and that's where Freshdesk really plays into that. So we have a fantastic customer relationship with all of our network, but we also support all of the IT and technical phone infrastructure for the network as well, and we channel all of that through Freshservice, as we do with all of our internal support as well. So for us, we really needed a platform that was able to scale to huge numbers of technically staff, and allow us to sort of centralize and put everything in one place where we could manage it, monitor it, improve it, and go on this journey with you together, which has been rapidly developing, I have to say, on both sides.
Yeah, it's been a good journey, and certainly the technology has moved forward a long way, I think, in the past 4 years. Okay, so let's sort of wind ourselves forward then to kind of present day. So when the pandemic hit, I think we should focus on that. So when the pandemic hit, you know, what did that really mean to Citizens Advice? What's the kind of impact across the organisation?
So I would like to talk about both sides of the organisation. So although I'm not overly qualified to talk about what our customers do, it is quite obvious how we support them with their work. And the local Citizens Advice charities are heavily dependent on face-to-face interaction with their clients and helping people. When we saw the pandemic hit, and we made some very early proactive decisions about safeguarding and protecting everyone, we had to mobilize and move 27,000 people into remote working. We also had to do the same nationally as well. So with our 1,000 staff, we closed all of our offices, and we moved people to remote working models pretty much overnight. And I'm really happy to say that although that impacted the service hugely because it was a massive change, we were able to really respond to that really quickly. I think we'll probably talk a little bit about disaster recovery and how that fits in a bit later, but the impact was huge, but our response to it, I believe, was also huge and really facilitated by how we had things set up.
Yeah, and did you have any minor disasters during that period? Was it literally a case of everybody needs to work from home, or did you manage to get any time to prepare and plan?
So it was around a 1 week decision path, so things escalated very, very quickly. We were monitoring the situation nationally and advising the network, and literally within the 1 business week, we decided to shut everything down and move everybody pretty much overnight to remote working. So there were plans in place. There was a task force that was brought together to deal with it and is still in place, but it wasn't, we didn't have the luxury of time, shall we say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember you mentioning 4 years ago, I guess, about your SaaS strategy. It might just be worth talking about how Citizens Advice view the cloud and why you decided to partake that.
Absolutely. So I think really this event is about disaster recovery, and to me, disaster recovery is all about understanding your weaknesses and making sure you plan and acknowledge those weaknesses. So for us, we weren't in a robust situation where we have a lot of resource, that we have a lot of technical expertise, that we can put these things in place that are really intense and money intensive. So we moved to a cloud first stance around 5 years ago, and we started to try and move all of our real estate in terms of product into a cloud hosted model. And for us, that really allows us to defer things like disaster recovery and some of the more intense things like pen testing to vendors. So we pay a little bit for that luxury of not having to own that, but we can make sure that we deal with the right vendors that we have confidence in that will own that for us. And really that was, I think, quite a clever strategy on our part to admit that we didn't have the ability to provide that fully in-house, and we were willing to pay and put that trust into other companies like Freshworks to do that on our behalf.
Great, thank you. So let's just change tack a little bit then, and try and understand a little bit about what that meant for customers. So did you see a change in how customers were engaging with Citizens Advice?
Yes, absolutely. So both our own customers in terms of the network we support and their clients, I think, you know, sometimes these situations, they drive innovation and they drive change very rapidly. So we had a lot of pilots in place around our national phone service, around a shared phone service, around moving people to self-service and to digital help. And that has really been accelerated over the last 6 months. So we were in a really good position that we'd planned for some of this already, although it was in very early stages. We'd put together a single sign-on solution for all of our clients using one identity provider for all of our cloud access and product management. And we were very, very lucky that we were able to harness all of that work very quickly, switch over to using that predominantly for our whole client base, and it was a fairly seamless move. It's not to say that there weren't some pain points, but what we were really able to do is using the data from the systems such as Freshservice and Freshdesk, we see where those pain points were and address them very, very quickly and make sure that we resourced and switched to dealing with those.
Got it. And did you see sort of any real changes in the way that your users like reacted or interacted with the software based upon the new working requirements and environments?
Yeah, so I have to say it has been a mixed response, not just on a technology level, just on a working level. Some people have adapted very quickly to the change. Some people it's disorientation, it's disruption, and they personally have found it harder to adapt to a new way of working. But what I can say is that the technology that's in place and we had in place hasn't been a factor in that, because the way we interact with that technology and the way we use that technology hasn't changed. And again, because we put this roadmap in 4 years ago when we started working with you and we started to integrate to other systems, the ability to contact us and get things resolved is exactly the same as always been. It's just now they're doing it from a remote location.
Got it. So you didn't see any changes in terms of like telephony or chat or email, or how did you sort of deal with that? Did you work on your knowledge base or other areas of the product?
Yeah. So again, I think it's really testament to the fact that we weren't expecting this, but we were planning for something like this. So a lot of that work had already been done, and although there were huge changes in how we had to move technology stacks like the phone system and move people to remote working, I'm really pleased to say that that complexity and that effort was actually on our side of the fence. For our customers, there was very, very little impact. People didn't have to ask us to do things. We just switched to our sort of processes for this kind of situation. And although we saw a huge peak when the pandemic first hit and people moved remotely for requests like porting phones and moving things, we've now seen that that's all leveled back to pre-pandemic sort of figures, and people are able to work very, very productively with the systems that we have.
Wow, pretty amazing. Okay, so let's just focus quickly then on data and metrics that you've perhaps been looking at to support any of these decisions. How did you go about this? You know, the kind of plethora of different things you could have been measuring, I guess.
Yeah, so for us, it's made really easy. So because we know what we're looking for in terms of what we want to measure, and we set those out very, very early, we didn't have to come up with new metrics or measurements. We just used our existing ones to see how much impact this had on our teams. And I think one of the most dramatic and effective things is that we were able to pull the data from Freshservice onto our BI tools, onto our dashboards, and monitor that in real time. And we were actually able to switch resources from teams that were less impacted by the change to move those staff into teams that were really under load. And what that really allowed us to do is look at those peaks and look at those troughs, move the people and train them very quickly into other teams so that we had that continuity and we had that consistency. We were able to respond without a team getting flooded, and we were able to stay on track. Now, that probably sounds a lot easier than it actually was, but again, in a matter of days, we were able to take people from the service desk team who have really high competency using the system and dealing with inquiries, moving them to our telephone service to help go through that backlog and keep things on track. And to me, that was an absolutely amazing success story.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah, and I think just finally then, let's just have a look what the kind of future holds then. So what do you have on your technical roadmap? What are you thinking about how to kind of keep improving and moving the service desk and environment forwards?
Okay, so I'm really excited actually. We're very luckily we've been invited to work on a beta product with Freshworks on Freshservice, which is a new software asset feature that's coming into Freshservice. Now, this is something I've been passionate about and asking for some time, because it means that we already manage our contracts in Freshservice, we already manage our vendors in Freshservice, we have a lot of our asset management in Freshservice, but a key missing part of that was SaaS and cloud products, which being the cloud product manager, you can understand I'm quite keen on having that. But essentially, if we can get this product to a point that it's usable, which I think will be very, very soon, it means we'll have a complete 360 view of our whole product portfolio estate, including the vendors, the contracts, the costs, the assets associated, the dependencies. Obviously, that feeds into the change, that feeds into our procurement, and I'm really, really excited. So we've spent quite a lot of time over the last 2 years onboarding internal teams. So Freshservice for us is not just a service desk, it's also our finance support desk, our HR support desk, procurement, facilities. Everything is now in one place, and having the ability to keep that under one place, all of the report data there, absolutely amazing.
Awesome stuff. Love it. Okay, and I think we're right at the top of the hour. So first, I'd just like to say thank you, Simon. It was great to speak with you again. It's been a while, but thanks for all the really great insights.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for asking me.
And thanks everybody for listening. I hope it was useful and you found some good snippets of information to help you take things forward. All the best.
Thank you, Simon and Simon. That was a really, really brilliant success story. It's always lovely to hear those really positive success stories. And I have a question actually for Simon Sheridan, if I may, if you're still there.
I am.
Oh, brilliant, fabulous. So what was really interesting is to me, it sounds like you're already in the process, you were planning for not necessarily this scenario, but you were certainly kind of geared up in the very early stages in terms of being able to continue to deliver service through the Citizen Advice. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, having gone through that process of kind of migrating and mobilizing that 27,000 workforce, what advice would you give yourself?
So that's a really good question, actually, because it would be very easy to say that it was a great success, it did work, but there were some very, very clear pain points. Okay. However, they're ones I'm well aware of and have been trying to battle since I started at the organisation. So I think actually what I would say, and I hope this doesn't sound too cliched, but if I was going to give myself some advice 4 years ago, I'd say persevere. Just keep going, don't give up, because there are things that are out of our control. But in the great words of Mahatma Gandhi, you may be in a minority of one, but you can still be correct. So some of the things that caused us pain are things that we'd already identified that hadn't changed, but it would have been very easy along the journey to have just stopped and thought that's someone else's problem, or we can't fix this. So the advice I would give myself is just persevere, carry on.
Fabulous. That's actually really, really good advice. Thank you very much. So thank you very much again for Simon and Simon sharing that brilliant presentation with us this morning. It was really, really insightful, and as I say, thank you very much again. So we now have our next speaker for this morning, and I'm delighted to welcome Antonia Jones. She is a senior IT analyst at the IT service desk at the University of Leeds. Antonia will be sharing her presentation with what happens when the lights go out. I'm not sure that needs very much more introduction. So good morning, Antonia, how are you?
Good morning, I'm good, thank you. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, very well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We can see that you've shared your screen, so I will hand over to you. Thank you very much, and off you go.
Thank you. So, hello, welcome to my presentation on our disaster recovery plans at the University of Leeds IT Service Desk, how we successfully survived a pretty big disaster in December 2018, and how that's changed and continues to change how we work. Before we get started, I thought it might be useful just to give you a bit of background information. Oh, it's not letting me click. There you go. So we'll dive right in. My name's Antonia Jones. I'm a senior IT technical analyst at the University of Leeds. I've been there since 2012. I always feel people are more approachable when you know a little bit about them. So I love Disney, competitions, churros, Halloween and memes. Dislike unorganised chaos, seafood and loud chewing. As you can probably tell, I'm not one to take myself too seriously, which I think has helped in the current circumstances. Less about me and more about the team. So every institution has a different structure. Ours is no different. So over the past few years, the service desk has gone through quite a lot of change. We had a very large restructure of IT services at the university, as you can probably tell, because everyone's pictures seem to have a different background. With this, all the local IT and central IT teams joined forces, moved about in this big shake-up, and we've changed from IT Service Desk as a separate entity to being part of Frontline Services. So with this, we're made up of the Service Desk, printer support team, user admin team, and our remote support team as well. So even before lockdown and working off-site, we've been very focused on having us all gaining skills across all areas, just so we can move our focus for whichever area needs it most at the time. So when you hear me refer to the team, I do mean it as a whole, not just the service desk. Just to prove Frontline Services are probably the most adaptable places I know. We have continued whilst off-site to focus on a longer-term shift left goal, joining forces with our client services team, cross-skilling wherever we can for us as IT to truly become one team. So a bit about the support we provide. So we provide support for over 38,000 students, 8,700 members of staff. We log over 90,000 queries per year and offer support via email, phone, self-service and face-to-face. Not so much face-to-face at the moment, but we'll get to that a little later. So that's just very quickly a little bit about us, but now into things disaster recovery. So I like to think that having a disaster recovery plan is a little like the technical challenge on the Great British Bake Off. A lot of the time, you're better off with more information you have. You're even more better off if you've had a run through and know what you're doing with that information. But if you have a disaster and you have no plan, it's not been tested, you've only got bits of info but not much, you end up winging it. This can work really well sometimes, but I'm going to say most of the time, not as much. So which one of these do you think had the plan? Which one do you think had tried this before and weren't caught off guard trying to figure it out as they went along? I'm going to be truthful, we've been both of these cakes. I'll continue to be truthful that in my home and work life during lockdown, I felt like both of these cakes in one day. However, what I'm wanting to stress is just how important having continuity plans is. When I first started at the service desk as an analyst in 2012, I remember at the time we were running an agent call logging system called Heat. So it's not like the Heat that some of you may be thinking. This was like a Frankenstein's monster of a call logging system where we had just kept building on top of it. So we built on, and then there was no turning back. So with this, we had a procedure for when the system was not accessible for how we can continue to work when our main systems are down. This was simply having paper sheets to document someone's query to then log it when the system was back up. So this was a plan for a struggling system. However, I'm certain that you will all have some plan for particular key systems that you have. The thing was that although some of our plans were documented, not all of them were, and there were a lot that we needed to look at in much more depth. This is where SDI came in. When I started, we were beginning our first steps with the SDI certification. As you're likely aware, a huge part of it is looking closely at what you offer, your processes, your procedures, and where you want to be. When you're looking so intensely at your documentation, you do start to quickly see the gaps in documentation, so the gaps of where the planning is missing. And with this, you can make the improvements. One of these improvements included, what would you do if you couldn't offer the service as it currently is? What would you do if your phone system went down, if the wired network went down, if the power went out? Endless different situations. So this is my dream and my nightmare as a huge overthinker. I could be there for days thinking of different situations. Obviously, you end up focusing on the most likely situations first, and then the ones that would be most disruptive to service, and adapting these over time too. What this looked like for us was creating a full disaster recovery plan, a major incident plan, and general communication plans as well. We have these processes documented in multiple locations. Obviously, you need to kind of plan for if the system you access the plans for goes down as well. So we've documented this in our SharePoint site. We've been moving the data into our team site, which is my new best friend, and also not as useful at this very moment, having good old paper copies in our big black emergency box, which is carried with us when it all kicks off and we have to decamp. In here we have things like how to access our various systems remotely, quite integral at the moment, like our phones, our current ITSM tool, an emergency 4G network if we were decamping together in case we have no network at all, and information on the different plans for the different severities of outages. But I'm going to tell you about a very particular outage. So this outage was probably one of the biggest game changers for our disaster recovery plans at the time, but this did set us up for a really good place for the disasters that may lie ahead. So I'll set the scene. It's December the 5th, 2018, a day like any other day at the service desk. It's busy, bustling. Overall, it's a standard day. We had been informed of a major incident with our lecture capture system. We've already begun the communications for this and had our application support team already on with the suppliers to work towards a fix. Little bump in the day, not too big a bump. Then came a big bump. All the machines powered off, lights went out, everyone kind of froze for a millisecond. So the first focus was evacuate. It sounds much easier than it actually was. Strangely, anyone that was on a call in our ACD phone system was still connected to the call, so I had to explain that they need to hang up so we can leave the building. Similar situation in our front office. When the power went out, students didn't even flinch. They just wanted to get their phones on the Wi-Fi. They wanted it fixed there and then. So we did manage to get everyone out, lock the doors, put the service desk emergency closure sign up from the good old black box, and we headed to the NASA office, which is our team's first meeting point. We check we've got everyone accounted for and head in to get cracking. With this power outage, it wasn't just our office. This affected the majority of university campus, parts of Leeds and the hospitals directly next to the university. So this was a very, very big power outage. However, as you all likely experience, even if everything else comes to a halt, the service desk does not close. IT cannot just stop, we have to keep going. So in the decamp office, we've got everyone onto an available machine, some of us on lone laptops. We're a little bit cramped in space, but we began updating our various comms areas like our phone system, status page, Twitter page, even our student portal. We were comms up to our eyeballs, and this is where we had our first learning experience for this outage. We focused on comms to our users, so the staff and students who access our service, but we didn't do any internal comms to IT at this point. Yes, we had recovery plans. The rest of IT didn't know them. They didn't know we'd moved to keep the service going, just that we weren't in that building. So tip 1 would be, in an emergency, is your user base the same as it is when you run it usually? Tip number 2, look at what part of the services are imperative. We have a priority of services that we offer. So we've got our self-service email, phone, and then face-to-face. So we sorted it though. We got people into our call logging system service now, directed our comms towards self-service, and then got the team logged into phones remotely rather than through the software on the office machines, and then we got some face-to-face support set up in our libraries. So with that, it kind of sounds like we've wrapped it all up, we've saved the day. Yes, go team. The fact that I've already said this was the outage that changed it all earlier highlights that this was most definitely not the case. So a power outage across campus can affect a lot of things. It can affect a whole load of IT systems in a mass amount of ways that users wouldn't expect. So then the major instance came rolling in. We already have one major incident for lecture capture. Let's add power outage across campus, phone outages across campus, servers being down due to the power outages, then taking down various servers used to access systems from off-site, such as VPN and our Desktop Anywhere service, licensed servers for various software being down, and just generally trying to keep our approaches joined up with the rest of the university as possible. So it started to become a bit of a communications nightmare, really. But this is where having those clear communication roles in place already really helps. So for our major incident process, we have a different IT operational lead within IT, would be the MI manager. This is rotated across all of IT, and we would have a backup for each day too. They will be the ones that will go out, find what's going on, facilitate between the technical teams to get a solution, and come back to us for the communications. So me and my fellow senior technical analysts will be in charge of updating the communication channels, and keeping our team informed, and just generally feeding back in all directions. So with this in mind, we had three major incident managers that day. Each senior analyst was running the comms for their major incident. Once again, there is hustle and bustle, energetic environment, but I'm kind of thinking, oh my word, we're doing this. We're running the service desk from a tiny office. We might not have everything we usually need, but we're still providing the fundamentals of our service. At this point, the hospitals are back online as well, which, although our focus is obviously the service desk, we are all human. We were very concerned if they didn't get power back pretty sharpish. So once again, it looks like it may all be over before it's really started. Once again, we're wrong. We're very, very wrong. So although the hospital's power is back, we're unable to bring ours back at the pure risk it would overload the network and bring everyone back down again. So we're having to continue on as we are. The longer you do it, the more you uncover things that you would have never thought of. As we were decamping, we were continually listing the different improvements that could be made, what's going well, what needs work, what next, what next, what next. However, we did end up having a little disruption to our thinking when another issue was uncovered. We were remotely logged into our phone system from our mobile phones. We were noticing that some of the calls were either dropping or not coming through. I could see on the supervisor console the call was coming into the phone queue, but it wasn't prompting onto the mobile phones. So with this, I don't know if any of you remember the huge national O2 phone outage a couple of years ago. This was happening on this same day as well. I also found out that O2 was a very popular network in our team. So this is where we had to adapt, as this hadn't come up in our plans before. Yes, we had a couple of phone lines in the decamp office, but we used the mobile phones if these lines went down like other areas off campus. We needed a solution fast, and this is where something so obvious was staring us in the face that we'd missed it. It was actually our newest members of the team with their fresh perspective that spotted this. We can now access the majority of our systems we have off-site. We're doing this within the decamp office on the wireless network already. So for us, this was, I'd say, the birthplace of home working for us. Over time, our different key systems have been upgraded, our ITSM tool, our ACD phone system, our websites. The majority of these were previously on site. This wasn't the case now. Each upgrade made them accessible off-site with a network connection. So yes, at that point in time, we couldn't access everything, but there would be nothing stopping us from having analysts stay at home, log in on their landlines and laptops and keeping the service running. For anything that needed on-site services, we would then redirect the call to one of us that had one of the stable on-site lines. The issue was uncovered nearing the end of the first day, so we were able to implement a plan for the next. We had the members of the team that lived furthest away log in from home, and the team members that were local come into the office for the face-to-face support and the general presence on campus. This was an idea that was put forward and developed by the team, which was very quickly included in our decamp plans for the future. With this all going on, obviously stripped back everything that we would have offered on that day, like if we had meetings, workshops, that sort of stuff. Another issue we also had on that day, we were supposed to have someone from the higher education community come visit us. They'd actually travelled over, they were at Leeds Beckett as well. We couldn't get in contact with them on the phone and they couldn't get in contact with us. So we did manage to get them by email. They were very understanding, but it was something where I was kind of thinking in that moment, why? Why today? Why is everything all at once? Why? But through all this, the power issue was being moved forward very quickly. We had backup generators. They were being fitted as this was all happening, and they were on, and then it was like, let there be light. We were back in the office, able to resume normal service, make some changes to our ever-updating disaster recovery plans. It's been difficult, but it's been an amazing experience, but it's not over. We get back in the office, we're cracking on, congratulating the team on all their hard work, and the lights go out again. The backup generator for our building has just gone. This is where I think the updates we had made to the plans and the fact we've just had possibly the most thorough real life run through of our lives, and that we had such an engaged team. I believe this is why the next part moved like clockwork. So this time when the power went out, we had all of our key support back up and running in 5 minutes. I had some of the team going straight to the library, some already evacuated and locked the office. I remember my colleague Cassie actually had remotely logged into her phone and was taking phone calls as she walked down to the decamp office. So for the team that was on the second shift, we were able to advise them to delay coming into work. It all went to plan because everyone knew what to do, what our priorities were. They were proud of the work that they were doing. They were working as a team whilst also feeling empowered and involved in it all. So in my career, that is probably one of the proudest moments for me to see. This mini outage, after the big outage, we recovered quickly. We were back in the office, and after having around 2 weeks of disruptions, we were back to a normal type of service. I say normal type. I don't think working at the service desk, you never really have a normal day. From that time, we made changes immediately. We had all of our IT operational leads, analysts, senior analysts, remote support team change from having desktops to having laptops and docking stations. This meant we would always have multiple devices that already had the software we needed to continue running the service. Also updated all the machines in the decamp office to have the same level of access and software as our service desk machines. We looked at additional laptops with specialist software for our user admin team. So in all this, our plans had been very focused on service desk because it was only recently at that point that we changed to frontline services. So our plans had to update to incorporate all the additional parts of our team now. We updated our comms plans for who we inform, via what methods. We gathered feedback from our colleagues through our IT about what we could have done better. We also made sure we celebrated the team. This was a massive triumph, and they needed to know that because of them, IT had kept going. They were able to support our customers at a very difficult time. This work definitely didn't go unnoticed. I remember at the time, other teams kind of being a little bit taken back about how we'd just managed to keep going. It then inspired other teams in IT and the rest of the university to start looking a bit more at the what if. This was the biggest outage that I had experienced up to that point at the University of Leeds. I knew that it was in no way the last time we would need to follow this process. However, I don't think any of us could have anticipated what was to come this year. You can't just make a plan and then that is it. It's integral to make frequent updates when software changes. You need to check everything's still up to date, especially when locations may change a fair bit. IT, especially in the current climate, is frequently changing. We have to expect that your disaster recovery plans would too. Frequent run-throughs are key. It sounds mad, but we were very lucky to have such an unexpected outage, as it allowed us to gain that real experience of what parts of our plans worked, what didn't, whilst also keeping us on our toes and flexible. This then meant that when we had to have, let's say, a somewhat extended version from home, we were much more prepared. I would say that if this particular outage was those hedgehog cakes from earlier, I'd be honest in that we wouldn't get Star Baker, but I'd also say that it wasn't an abomination against hedgehog kind. The key was that the impact for the users was minimal, but I'm happy they uncovered even more for us to improve on, which we did and we still are. So how does this help with adapting how we can offer support whilst working from home? Well, we had already shown that we could run our services from a different location. We just had to adapt that a little further with us not all being in the same location and with it going on a little bit longer than 2 weeks. A lot of the tools and processes already in place. We just had to adapt some of them for a new situation we hadn't planned before. However, as you expect, there was more to learn in what I'd like to think is a somewhat ongoing disaster recovery plan. With all these situations, a huge factor was communication. How do we communicate with users, with the team, with individuals? I'd mentioned earlier we're moving files to Teams. As you can imagine, we have ended up using it as one of our biggest communication tools. We use Teams for our central comms to communicate with IT. I would say that about 6 months ago, it barely made an appearance in our plan. But now we use Teams to store day-to-day tasks in an easily accessible place, use the chat function for us to be able to ask questions, use it for every meeting you could possibly think of. We use it for after-work socials and obviously for the gifts as well. But from our lights out unexpected outage, we had more of a plan when it came to communicating with other teams in IT and getting them involved. So we've used similar Teams channels across IT. We've included them in our daily briefs, which are now daily Teams meetings to ensure that we can all get involved, collaborate and stay informed. I can't forget our users though and how we communicate with them. From our plans, it's allowed us to be able to quickly identify priorities in service, which ones are good to have and which ones need to be updated. We've continued to offer everything barring face-to-face. So we've seen an increase in people using self-service rather than phone and email. However, we did still want to offer that phone service. It's a difficult time. Some people need that type of contact, and we had the system to allow us to keep going. I'm going to say mostly, just because this is another part that we've had to adapt, and it's another thing where we're waiting for a bigger solution. So there is the realistic part with continuity plans, in that some things you can't change or upgrade with a snap of your fingers. Some of these things take time and investment and a little bit of luck. So when I was talking about our phone system earlier, we can log in off campus, we can put a phone number in, the phone will then divert to that number. Obviously we had the O2 phone signal issue. However, we've not also had where you're dependent on people's home signal, but also at the same time dependent on various different network providers. We had people before logging into their landline phones, but when your entire family is at home, I imagine that they will probably need to use that phone as well. So to get round the poor signal problems, we created Skype numbers. They can enter the Skype number into the ACD phone system, and then it means it's quickly all through the internet rather than depending on that. Once again, it's something where we've put in a quick thinking solution whilst we're waiting and testing for a more permanent one. Another part of this, I think, echoes that this is a never-ending plan. So we also did have the next challenge of the internet, my best friend and biggest foe. Before, we were not at the whim of our home connections. Obviously, all of our plans were about us all being together on site. If there was power outage, we'd move elsewhere. But it's once again, with the plans we already had, we adapted that. So anyone that was struggling with that network, we've then provided them network dongles similar to the portable 4G network we have in the big black box so that they can keep going. At the end of the day, your motivations all come from what is the impact to users and impact on your team. For our users, the power outage was huge to them, and us having to work remotely now is even bigger. They want to know they can access the systems they need, the lectures are accessible, the deadlines can be met, whilst having to balance having to learn a new way of working. This is very serious stuff. This could affect their grades, their marks, their time at the university and their lives. So we can't wave a magic wand and fix everything, and it can be hard that at times things will be out of our control, but we can control how we react to those situations and those challenges. It's something where the impact this has on the team. These scenarios have allowed my team to see the difference they make in a big way as well. I've seen members of the team step up in a way I haven't before, regularly get to see them collaborating with other teams, finding solutions, doing it all with enthusiasm and determination. So the other thing I'd like to stress is you cannot forget that we are all human, and we need to incorporate that into our plans as well. So I'd like to finish just with these final points. So I've been honest throughout these instances that this hasn't been perfect. I don't think any plan can ever be perfect, but I do deem them successful. Users' point of view, they didn't have to see everything we had to do in the background to get them to continue to work. Even throughout the past 6 months, although some of the services may have changed, still offered those core fundamental services, carrying on with the day-to-day, whilst also implementing a whole load of new services along the way as well. All this with as minimal impact to users as possible, some so much that they haven't even realised that I've been able to, on the phone, resolve their issue at home, at my desk, in my daughter's bedroom, surrounded by far too many cuddly toys. So with this, our steps to success was have a plan, think about what is important to your users, look at what the priorities are and document it all. Don't forget that all the planning could be wasted if you don't do a run through to make sure it works. Fresh eyes find fresh solutions. Not sustainable to have new staff every time you need to do a run through, but it's something where having someone external to your team look at your plans definitely makes you see a little bit more, connected to other people's plans, collaborate, share to help each other improve. Do not be disheartened if you're thrown a curveball. Be flexible, be resilient, and focus on what your goal is. And trust and support your team. You do not have to carry the service on your shoulders. You are all in it together, and I know that they will make you proud. And with that, I know I talk very quickly, and with that, I just thank you for listening and thank you for giving me this opportunity as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Antonia. Thank you for delivering such a wow, I suppose, a wow presentation. And certainly that date in December was really integral in the journey, in your guys' journey, and it was a really, really human presentation. So thank you very much for sharing that. Just had a bit of feedback that says, what a great and interesting, informative presentation, and a little bit of humour. Antonia delivers this so well, and that was from one of our listeners today. So I'd like to just really echo that, I think, and say thank you very much again for delivering such a brilliant presentation, Antonia.
Thank you.
That's okay. Sounds like you've learned a lot, and actually that's really what happened back in December has really kind of set you up now for delivering the service, in this current climate. As you said, IT is changing daily, and it's how now this has set you up to deliver that service in whatever the new norm becomes. So thank you very much again to Antonia. So now on the agenda we have a short break. So if we could come back at about 11 o'clock, that'd be fabulous. So that gives you about 15 minutes to go and grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and we'll be back at 11 o'clock with Adam Norman on 10 tips to run major incidents effectively. We'll see you shortly. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Hope you've managed to grab a cup of tea and coffee. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to you our next speaker for the morning. Our next presenter today is Adam Norman, who's founder and CEO of MIM. His presentation is around controlling chaos, an introduction to major incident management, and 10 tips to run your major incidents effectively. Thank you for joining us today, Adam. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Tessa. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's brilliant. So we can see your slides, which are brilliant. If you could perhaps just pop those onto slideshow, that would be fabulous. And then I think we are ready to go. Perfect, lovely. We can see those now. So thank you very much. Adam, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you. But before I start, I really enjoyed the last presentation. I think the humour in it was absolutely brilliant, particularly the Oprah meme. So, firstly, thank you very much to the team at SDI for inviting us along today, and thank you all of you for the opportunity to speak. I know how busy we all are. So I'm going to be talking about controlling chaos, and this is going to be an introduction to major incident management for everyone. My name is Adam Norman. So I'm the founder and CEO at MIM. So MIM is the professional body for IT major incident management, and we own the global best practice in IT major incident management. The training and certification is exclusively owned and run by MIM. To give you an idea of scale, we've got clients in about 80 different countries across all major industries. So we've been really blessed that the community and the professionals have really moved swiftly to adopt this global best practice. So in today's session, I have the pleasure of talking you through an overview of major incident management. But before I do, I'd really appreciate if all of you could just take a second and have a think about what one word comes to mind when you think of major incident management. Okay, so if you said things like stress, chaos, pressure, that would be pretty typical of what we hear, even with really well-seasoned major incident professionals. Okay, and it's interesting, in Gartner's latest report, they stated that average cost of downtime was about £5,600 per minute. So that's about £336,000 an hour. But what's interesting is that's the average. So we run our own annual surveys, and many clients that we work with, companies can lose millions in 10 minutes. If you're a retail bank or have an asset management arm, and you have a trading platform, and the market's particularly volatile, and your bankers can't make trades, you could potentially lose hundreds of millions in a few minutes. So this is really what I want to talk about today, and why major incident management is so important. So in the talk, we're going to be covering what is a major incident, first of all. What is major incident management? We're then going to talk about the objective of major incident management. But for those of you who are familiar with major incident management, I'm then perhaps going to change your thinking by talking about the 3 phases of a major incident and the sub-objectives and why it's really important to behave very differently in these 3 phases. We're trying to achieve different things. We'll then cover a couple of common mistakes, and then we'll go through a basic list of being prepared. So if you were to implement a new function, some of the assets you would want in place. So first of all, what is a major incident? An event that creates a significant negative impact or urgency for a business or organization. So major incidents cannot be dealt with using the standard procedures, that is the incident management process, and they demand a response, a strategy and direction beyond the capabilities of that standard incident management process. So that sounds very woolly, but the real answer is it depends what the business that we are serving does and what it needs from us, i.e. what is mission critical to that business. So for anyone who's completely new to major incident management, a good example, albeit slightly simple, of a major incident would be an e-commerce retailer's website going down. So we've all got our favorite e-commerce brands, whether that's clothing, whether it's tech or gadgets, whatever it may be. So the website goes down, customers can't browse or purchase the products, the retailer is losing revenue, and there is potentially reputational damage. And the risk of potentially losing the customer to a competitor, particularly if there's good substitutes for that product. And what I want us to think about is e-commerce retailers, like software companies, don't think of customers in terms of individual purchases. There's actually lifetime value of those customers, meaning across a year they might purchase 5 times, across 3 years they might purchase 10 or 15 times. And so it's not just that initial loss of revenue. And this is where things like primary, secondary and tertiary impacts come in. So in this example, really simply, the e-commerce business sells products on the store. Customers who go on there can't purchase when the website goes down. good businesses, particularly large companies, have very accurate forecasting on their sales. So they typically understand in periods how much money they are going to make before it happens. So you can quantify that by looking at historic revenues and really utilizing your data. So, for example, they might know for every 100,000 visits in a particular period to that website, they will make 1,000 sales at a value of £100 revenue per sale. So about £100,000 each hour, okay? But it's not just about the direct revenue that's lost. So as I mentioned, you've got brand and reputational damage, and that is customers going to the website, finding out it's not available, and them thinking, why am I unable to browse? Why am I unable to purchase? What's wrong? What's going on with the company? And as I said, if there's a good substitute, they may just go and purchase from a competitor. Now, depending on which generation of consumer you're talking about, some of them may even consider security issues. So there's been a move, obviously, of a particular generation that's only just become comfortable with using their credit cards online. If you then go to a website that's down several times within a period, they are going to start asking questions about the security of that site and may not feel as comfortable purchasing. And I mean, to be fair, even people who are comfortable, we have this expectation nowadays to be able to do everything very, very quickly without any fuss, without any friction. So even those of us that are comfortable, we get pretty frustrated pretty quick, and that's pretty evident on social media, particularly in the consumer market. So let's consider an even wider aspect of this. And as I say, going into the secondary and tertiary impacts of this example I've given you. If you're a large publicly traded company and your company is listed on the stock exchange, if you have a couple of major incidents that are very public, whether that is just through social media, or whether that is through traditional press, well, your share price potentially may get hit as well, which is obviously an additional challenge and a very real one that occurs these days. So before I move on, let me just highlight a couple of reasons why major incidents occur. So pretty simple and straightforward. Increased demand or load on the infrastructure, traditional failure of IT assets, changes made to the IT environment, that's authorized and unauthorized. In our last annual survey, it was about 70% of major, or 71% of major incidents that were caused as a result of a change. And that's really interesting, because thinking about when you're running a major incident, that typically means that changes should be the first thing you're looking for a quick win. Human error, so that's mistakes made by our technical resolving groups, configuration conflicts between assets, or security issues are just a few of the reasons why major incidents occur. So let's talk about what is major incident management then. So it's a combination, so it's the process, that is the documented steps that you use to achieve hopefully a consistent outcome, that's resolving the major incident, but also a function. So that is the people and the roles and responsibilities that execute that process. And it can be a service, so there are plenty of companies out there that also sell major incident management as a service. It's not just internal teams that use it for themselves. So why does major incident management exist? Why isn't it just part of normal incident management? Indeed, in some companies it is. Well, the e-commerce retailer example I gave you is a pretty good one. But let's not just consider the obvious. Let's not just think about financial loss, and that's the direct revenues that a company may lose or would have otherwise received being lost. There's productivity loss. So this may mean that staff within a business are not able to perform their job. There is a cost to all of us. The business is bearing that cost. There's delayed project costs that we need to consider. The reputational damage, as we talked about, that can either be through your share price, or it can be product or service reputation directly to our customers. And finally, legal obligations not being met. So this is an interesting and often overlooked one. Many industries have very specific legal obligations that they must meet around data and records that they have to keep. Losing these mean that they both fail their obligations and often, particularly in banking or insurance, there are some really severe penalties, financial penalties. So really, when you consider the wider business and the impact on the business that major incidents cause, the value of having a separate major incident process and function kind of becomes rather obvious, particularly in larger companies who have more to lose, and the cost of that is not prohibitive of putting it in place. So let's talk about the objective of major incident management next. So in the global best practice, the objective of major incident management, the primary objective, is to restore normal service operation of business critical services as quickly as possible whilst maintaining stakeholder confidence. Now, for those of you that are familiar with major incident management, the first part of that, the restoring normal service operation, probably looks fairly familiar. The whilst maintaining stakeholder confidence is an interesting evolution. So this is in version 3 of our training curriculum that we've added this in. So this is the 3rd version. And essentially it's saying that in equal part of restoring a major incident is how you maintain the confidence of your stakeholders. That's both internal and external. And this really changes the mindset of how you run major incident management, and also the skill set that anyone running a major incident needs to have. So what we mean when we're talking about restoring normal service operation as quickly as possible is not necessarily permanent fix. It can absolutely mean a workaround. We are putting something in place to get our end users up and running as quickly as possible. There may be other work that has to go on in the background. Sometimes the permanent fix is the quickest solution as well, so it nicely lines up. Other times there are going to be actions that need to occur afterwards because we have just done something temporary to get them working. And this is where you start to lean into problem management, start talking about root cause analysis, which is slightly outside of the scope of our talk today. Next, so I want to just say that in the global best practice training, it's a 3-day program, and there is a whole day dedicated to process. So when thinking about this talk, I really wanted to provide as much value to all of you as possible, but obviously I'm not going to be able to cram a day's worth of content in. So what I thought is I would talk about the process as an overview and talk about these 3 phases of the major incident. So these 3 phases are the initial 15-minute phase, the post 15-minute phase, and resolution and closure. Now this isn't quite as neat and linear as it looks. This post 15-minute phase can last hours, in really severe cases can even last days. And so it's not quite as neat as it might appear. Now, in the initial 15 minutes, essentially all we're trying to do is mobilize the operation. And this is where these sub-objectives come in. And often I think even mature processes and operations who are good at running major incidents make mistakes, is they forget that these 3 phases, there are some sub-objectives that are really, really important for the overall primary objective. You don't get there without doing these other things. So in the initial 15 minutes, one of the very first sub-objectives is to validate your major incident. And this is really, really important because you imagine an operation that sees high volumes of major incidents. Now, let's say that we don't know our infrastructure that well. So some of you will be familiar with this. So we keep raising major incidents, but it turns out to be infrastructure that isn't even in the live environment yet. Just parts of it have been turned on, alerting has let us know. Now, if you issue communications as a major incident manager and then have to retract those, a couple of times that's not a problem. If that happens consistently, what you will find is alert fatigue. So you will find that your stakeholders no longer jump to action as you would like them to, because they're so used to major incidents being raised and then declassified. So it's really important. It's a really simple thing to do. This sub-objective of one of the first things we're doing is validating the major incident. And that can be as simple as getting on the phone with the end users to confirm what is unavailable. It can be as simple as one of the technical resolving groups validating the infrastructure is live and it is not responsive. The second sub-objective in this initial 15-minute phase is to make all stakeholders aware of the major incident. Now, another thing that people really miss with the right intent here is the desire to provide a better update in their initial communication. They're trying to get loads of information. They're too slow to issue it. If you've got a slick and robust major incident process and function, people know what they're supposed to be doing. 15 minutes to issue your communications from the raising of a major incident is more than achievable. We see this with many clients, very achievable. All we're trying to do at this stage is to tell our stakeholders we are aware there is a major incident and the operation has been engaged. Okay, that's all we need to do at this stage. And the third sub-objective is to engage your relevant technical resolving groups. So no doubt in validating the major incident, you may have a primary technical person involved, but this is where we're trying to involve multiple technical resolving groups. This is where we are bringing them together to begin the diagnosis, which takes us nicely into the post 15-minute phase of a major incident. So very simply, the sub-objective, the first one here, we are identifying and implementing workarounds, okay? And this is where whoever is running the major incident is bringing together this collective brain power and really maximizing collaboration between this diverse group of technical specialists, trying to identify how we're going to resolve this as quickly as possible. And the second sub-objective goes right back into this stakeholder confidence piece and maintaining your communications. Issuing communications that don't say anything is not useful. So understanding your stakeholders, understanding what they need to feel confident in your leadership of a major incident, really, really important. And then if we move into the resolution and closure, very similarly to validating a major incident, we want to validate that the service has been restored. So restoring normal service operation, but also validating that. Not just saying, yes, the infrastructure is back online, but actually validating with the users of the services that were affected. And then finally, completing administration, reporting, and post-major incident reviews. The interesting thing about this is post-major incident reviews are often, let's say we've all been guilty of paying lip service to them. They can be an incredible learning tool. So if you pay them proper attention and produce a good post-major incident report, that is everything that happened, why decisions were made, who was involved. If you bring new people into the team to run major incidents, they have this huge history of how your best major incident responders have dealt with certain issues, so they can understand all of this. They're incredible learning tools. So this is a step that we really try and drive people to look at and pay proper attention to, and not just use it perhaps as a report to send off to management, but really use it as a learning document. So I've given you an interesting overview of the three phases of a major incident, and hopefully for those of you that are familiar, that just challenges your thinking to not just be thinking about that primary objective and just think about restoring service, but really considering that your stakeholders are of equal importance. So let's talk a little bit about some common challenges here and common things that we see companies, particularly when they're perhaps earlier in the maturity curve of establishing a major incident function. So preparation being the first. Preparation is a really interesting one. Failing to be prepared to deal with any kind of major incident is very similar to what you see in cybersecurity. You see companies who don't typically invest until they have a really severe security issue. You see the same with major incident management, particularly with smaller organizations who haven't felt the need. Not having a process, not having trained people leaves you quite substantially exposed. Next, ambiguity, so failing to define mission critical services and the associated infrastructure. That is, do you know what services are absolutely mission critical? Do you understand the business you're serving? And do you understand the commercials around it? So what's important to that business? Collaboration, so failing to collaborate. So the service desk is a really important part of major incidents, particularly at the start. The major incident team or whoever is playing that role is obviously very critical. The technical resolving groups and your vendors and suppliers. Collaboration across all of those is really, really important if you're going to reduce downtime and you're going to resolve a major incident as quickly as possible. Stakeholders failing to establish and maintain confidence. I've talked a lot about that, but interesting things happen when you fail to do that. So a good example, a managed service provider has a major incident. They have a major incident team. The major incident team fails to engage, let's say, some one-on-one dialogue with the local service manager, who also works for the same company, of a site that's affected. Well, what you often see then is halfway through the major incident, the service manager might go direct to some of the technical resources. They might come on a major incident bridge call and try and take over the leadership of that. Now, it's not for any negative reason. The service manager is trying to get the same result the major incident manager is. The only thing that's happened is the major incident manager has not spent the additional time or not really thought about how they keep that stakeholder happy. And that naturally, those things naturally just lead to an elongated major incident and the downtime taking longer to resolve. So stakeholders are an absolute crucial part to this. Training, failing to prepare your people. Now, naturally, I'm biased. I think what we do is excellent. I would. But even people who don't work with us, what I would urge you to do is not just think about the process. As an industry, we've been guilty of this for decades now, where we spend a lot of time thinking about the process, but we wouldn't put a technical person and expect them to have a lot of competence without them having some formal training. In the same breath, major incident management is leadership. How can we keep putting people in a major incident role without giving them formal leadership training where they really understand people skills and soft skills? And we spend a whole day on that. We teach psychometric profiling, that is how to communicate for different styles. We talk about organizational change and understanding the sensitivity and situational leadership. So training your people to actually lead, not just understand the process, is a really common mistake we see, but it's one of the things that has the quickest benefit to an organization. It's thinking about the soft skills that you teach your people. And then finally, a common mistake is details. So failing to capture adequate details when a major incident is initially logged. This typically happens because a major incident team or the major incident leadership hasn't spent enough time with the service desk and given them enough support to understand what we need to capture when it's first logged. And there's an ongoing relationship that the major incident team needs to own and really support the service desk there. But failure to get a good understanding on the initial capture of a major incident naturally leads again to additional time to resolve the major incident. So I think I'm nearly coming to my time, so I'll speed up slightly. A couple of key assets to think about when you're first setting up a major incident function. A documented and agreed process that has been shared not just with the major incident team, but with the technical resolving groups, the service desk, and everyone who's going to be required to play a role within that. Really, really important. Agreeing it with the business is also another key thing. Your communication templates, whatever tools you're using, you want to be able to essentially fill out the template and it take as little as time as possible, so you can get back to leading people and managing your stakeholders. So having those pre-prepared, very, very important. Up-to-date contact lists, another one that catches people out. If it's an out-of-hours major incident and you're scrambling around trying to find which technical resolving group member is on call at 2 in the morning, that again is just a waste of your time. Making sure those are up to date and readily available, really important. CMDB, so naturally understanding your infrastructure. I appreciate that the reality of this is very few companies have a really good, well-maintained, up-to-date CMDB. What I can promise you is the companies who do major incident management very, very well do, and it means they get their infrastructure, they understand what's impacted and what it's attached to. It really creates speed. Your communication channels, so knowing which channels you are using and keeping those to a minimum, meaning that you do not want to have 10 different channels and people on different channels trying to talk to one another. You need the entire technical resolving groups resources in one place, working with yourselves, working with the service desk. Properly trained people are absolutely the biggest asset when major incidents occur. A well-configured ITSM tool. So basically, you need to be able to identify major incidents. They cannot look like every other type of incident. Doesn't matter how you do that, whether it's a SEV 0, whether it's a SEV 1, it's your choice, but making sure that it's very clear what a major incident is within that tool. And then finally, the agreed critical services list with the business. That is, what are the most crucial things we do? What services underpin that? So, in summary, we've talked about what is major incident, what is major incident management, talked about the global best practices objective of major incident management, as well as those 3 phases and the sub-objectives and just how important they are to changing the behaviours in each stage. Talked about a few common mistakes and being prepared. So, thank you all very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I really hope I've managed to give at least some of you some value here, given you some things to think about that you may not have previously considered. If you'd like to get in contact with us in any way, my name's Adam Norman, as I mentioned. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. We're at majorincidentmanagement.com if you're interested in training services. And the other thing to highlight is the Major Incident Management Virtual Expo, which is in November. So last year we had about 3,000 professionals from about 76 countries attend. Lots of speakers, lots of suppliers to look at everything major incident management that can be found on the website. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. That was a really insightful presentation. I think the 3 distinct phases of major incident management are really, really brilliant in terms of what they comprise. And I think regardless of whether somebody is kind of new to incident management or on their journey, I think that was really valuable just to kind of remind everybody, what those 3 distinct phases are and what they comprise. At the beginning of the presentation, I think, Adam, you talked about 71% of major incidents are typically caused as a result of change, and that was from some research, I think.
Yeah, so as part of the virtual expos that we run, we also do these big annual reports. I forget the exact number of contributors to that, but it was well over 1,000 major incident professionals of varying seniority, so some owned functions, some were on the ground, and yeah, that came out of our annual report. It's really interesting, really interesting.
Okay. Is there, I'm just going to ask, is there an opportunity that we might be able to share that research with the audience today post this event?
Yeah, I'll ask the team. Interesting enough, a very similar one will also be available at November's event, but yeah, it's last year's has that, absolutely.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Adam. That was a brilliant presentation, and thank you very much for joining us. And I wish your event in November every success.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. It now gives me a great pleasure to welcome our next speaker of the day. Our next speaker is Bill Doyle. He's head of IT disaster recovery for ICON. Good morning, Bill, and thank you very much for joining us. Well, we can see his screen, so perhaps he might just be on
there
mute.
I am now. I think I'm unmuted now. Good morning. How are you? How are you this fine morning?
I'm very well, thank you. That's my favourite trick. I often say the most profound things when I'm on mute and nobody gets to hear them. So thank you for joining us, and I will hand over to you, Bill.
Okay, no problem. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present. What I'm going to present today is more a practical approach to disaster recovery in an organisation that, if you like, paid lip service to the whole concept of disasters and recovery from them in the past. So this is really how we've tackled it and put some processes in place. So the first, just an introduction, I'm Bill Doyle. I'm Head of Disaster Recovery in ICON PLC since 2018. Previously, I've had various roles in infrastructure services, from director to program manager, project manager, engineer, and pretty much a long 30+ year career in IT, going back to tape reels and punch cards, etc. But less of my age on that, and we'll carry on. So before we begin, I will explain how ICON have elevated and re-engineered disaster recovery using different processes and methodologies. Okay, so here we go. So the first, a quick brief around ICON. Who are we and what do we do? So we're a CRO. We do an awful lot of support for the huge pharmaceutical organizations in they're getting it says itself. I've tongue-tied myself already. So we're outsourced clinical development. We've mainly grown organically, but have bolstered our growth through a number of strategic acquisitions, which have broadened our service portfolio and have added scale to all of our existing services. In addition to our existing business wins and activities, we've been awarded 85 COVID-related projects, including several of the world's largest vaccine trials that are carrying on at this moment in time. And that's a testament to how our expertise in vaccine development is recognized globally. So on to the journey and subject of today's event. So pretty much an index, so why, where, and how we went about. So these are the items I'll be touching on as part of this presentation. So where to start, or the why really is the effects of a disaster, regulatory. So ICON is a very highly regulated environment with audits and validation process reviews on a daily basis as part of our lives. So we live in that space. And then, of course, then the benefits of, so if you have disaster recovery strategies and plans, what are the benefits of that? So where to start? So in the case of ICON, it was a complete and utter jungle, a jigsaw, and a headache, but it was a case of getting our heads around it and coming up with a plan of action. So where do you begin? So we basically did a full review of all existing documents. We did a pulse check, I would call it, on disaster recovery in ICON. And this entailed the review of legacy business resumption, technical recovery documentation, the alignment of critical services, technical services with the business, to actual technical capabilities in supporting disaster recovery commitments, etc. And from that, then we could create an interim plan of active actions then to implement. What we found pretty early on was that we discovered plenty of wordy documents and verbal commitments. So a lot of blagging, if you like, or verbiage, but no technical recovery or no specific processes that amounted to anything achievable, but plenty of documents to get stuck into and read. So from that, then it was a case we really had to break into it. So we had to gather and review specific documents and processes, etc. And then from this, we could then start looking at a strategy forming, so how we go about consolidating this information and making use of it as we went forward. We then had to then map our technical capabilities to a realistic, measurable service level commitment. So it's all well and good saying, but you need to talk the talk and walk the walk, as it were. So we basically had to then come up with realistic RTO, so recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives, etc., and aligning to realistic timeframes that our technologies could support in a recovery situation. And this then gave us our if you like, our roadmap for committing to an SLA to the business. From that, then we could create an interim plan, so really get up and running. So it was a case of aligning our disaster recovery tiers to technical capabilities, baselining business applications to that tier, and then we can come up with SLAs that we could communicate with the business and start working with the business in that space. So really going from the wordplay and verbiage to delivering tangible activities and measurable results, KPOs, etc., etc., and then creating structured processes to support business applications. So that was all great, but then what next? So the next place we had to look at our core technologies. So what do I mean by that? It's a case of looking at our, I feel like our 7 core or our IP stack or whatever you want to call it. But in this model here, you see At the very top, we look at our tier 3 applications, which are our generic ones. Tier 1 and 2 are business critical. But then we looked at the platforms that they sat on. So storage, servers, firewalls, DNS, everything that sits on it, and then it goes right away down to everything that's needed to support a desktop in an IT environment. So we looked at all of these applications and then basically aligned them then to our core foundations, as it were. From that, then we picked the critical platforms and then looked at the current capabilities, recoverability, capacity, business risk, etc. So did we buy high availability? Did we buy duplicates? Did we have mirroring? What was put in place that we could actually back off to and understand? So once we had these identified, then we could then look at the platforms. This is a pretty complicated slide, but what it does is really outline if I get a pointer here. So we outline does that work? I think it actually works, does it? Okay. So on the left-hand side, we basically recovery order, so the priority of recovering systems in the event of a disaster. We then created tests to test them. These are, oh, there's a pointer now. So we have there it is now. So then in the blue, then we created tests for all of these platforms that we could perform manually. And then these then describe the capabilities of those platforms as well. And then we also created tests around our storage mediums. So where we store user data, whether it be a database, it could be Oracle database, SQL database, Windows databases, etc. They're all covered here where we can show that we can back up and restore that data to a point in time. So, excuse me. So then moving on to that, then we could create a long-term plan of activities. So this is where we actually put some real structure in place, and it was around 3 tiers, which was A, the core, B, the business process, and C was the business itself. So from that, then we then created a house, if you were. So it's a house of IT, but it's basically where our foundations, that's our core alignment. So our foundations really are our technology and technical capabilities. Without these, we have nothing. So our data centers, etc., what components are there, how they run, etc., and what their capabilities and risks may be. Once we understood that, we could create pillars, which is basically a lean process for looking at business applications and how we manage them. And then thirdly is the roof. Then the roof is really where we align with the business. So the IT and the business were speaking together. We have a similar view and on the same page. So then that creates, as I mentioned, the House of IT Disaster Recovery. So the foundation, as we can see here, supports high availability, redundant systems, data centers, etc. So all the IT worlds and technologies are lived there. In the process, then we have our technical and strategic. So how technicians and engineers, if you like, how we go from a mindset of providing solutions to being strategic and aligning with the business on their requirements. And then the roof then is where we're aligned in that same space. So this is pretty much the outline structure of how we engage the business in today's business world in ICON. From this, then we then looked at our recovery tiers. So we really refined what we couldn't do from a technology perspective. So can we mirror? Can we replicate? How quickly can we back up and restore data, etc., etc. And then we can give firm tiers. So in ICON we run a 3-tier system for our applications. And then from that, then we can, as you can see there, we commit to an RTO or PO, and then map all of our business systems to those targets as well, our commitments. So first thing we did then was, as I mentioned, we're highly regulated and audited, so everything is auditable, templates, etc. So we created a core systems capability, recoverability, and risk and test plan for our core systems. So this is really good in that it gives an outline of the criticality, the capability, recoverability, and capacity of a system. So if it was, as an example, your firewall environment, it would state that you may have 2 sets of firewalls with dual power, dual supervisors, etc., etc. And then what happens if one or both of those fail? And you can do a risk matrix then as well in that space as to what happens if one fails or both fails. And then we then test that capability annually to prove that the integrity of that system is in place. And we do that across all of our core platforms to ensure that we have that foundation, that we do have high availability, etc., and that we can test it. And that has been invaluable in doing testing where we found faulty supervisor engines, faulty power supplies, etc., as these scheduled tests take place. So this is really around disaster prevention rather than supporting a disaster event itself. Okay, so then the next, then we looked at our applications then. So how do we then manage the business applications? So we created a process around that where it's key to managing business application alignment for new or any upgraded systems. So this structure allows us then to leverage our ServiceNow system. We can input the application name, the business commitment within that, and then from a create recovery plans as and when needed to support that application. We then, as you can see there, we then look to run tests, etc., perform manual tests on those applications as we go forward. We then communicated to the services that we provide to the business. So our commitment to the business is, and to audit, etc., is that we perform testing of our business critical systems annually, and then we perform tests of all of our core technologies and technology-related systems annually as well. And therefore, and we have an audit trail which is electronically signed for all of those tests as we move forward. For business applications, then something similar. We have an audit trail of the application that we're going to test, and then we create a test plan, and then we screenshot all those activities, etc., and then sign them off for review post test. And then that looks like something like this, where we have a one-page type document, and there's an example just of tests from this year so far, where we basically perform the failover tests, follow specific scripts, and then we then do a one-page certificate to sign off that that test either was successful or unsuccessful, etc. So what do we get from this really? I suppose we get a lot of alignment and collaboration. So within, and here's a good one, within IT itself, we get to collaborate across teams. So every organization have large IT departments or divisions, programmers, technologists, etc. So within disaster recovery, we have a lot of virtual teams, multiple disciplines. We then consider cultural nuances. ICON is a global organization, so we have a lot of different cultural nuances to be cognizant of. Within the we approach disaster recovery, we look to get a shared vision, buy-in, and then we do an awful lot of planning. So when we're doing testing, we plans with these virtual teams, we work together, and we have regular communications and motivation to succeed. And then, of course, we share successes and, unfortunately, sometimes failures, and then we reschedule, etc., and so on and so forth. But a key part of it is as well is that we cycle the teams. So each year we have different team members and different roles, so everybody gets to experience the next best thing to a disaster event by invoking a failover themselves and managing that. So that's been working really good for us. Then how do we align business and IT? Well, I suppose everyone has heard of this, but it's true. It's the business impact analysis. Business impact analysis is key to in any disaster type of initiative, in that we need to understand what the business deem as critical to them. So these analyses, and in the case of ICON, we purchased the product called Continuity 2, not selling it or anything, but it's a product we use, and within that we could get all of the business owners to input their criteria for operating in a disaster from day 1, day 7, day 14, etc. And what that meant for us is that we could align IT services to those requirements when it came to that, in addition to desks and office space and all of that. So what it meant was that we could get from a business then, the business are interested in their staff, their contact service lines, they fill out the BAA, that outlines then what applications they need to operate, what timelines they need to operate to. And then from a technology perspective then, we can then do a system impact analysis against those critical systems to be able to align what applications they need, at what level they need to be. And from that, then we can then map to the business and then ensure that those critical applications have failover environments, they have failover testing, they are tested, and the business have confidence in the capabilities of their applications in the event of a disaster. That works really well. I think key to that is that, sorry, something just came on my screen there. So key to that is that disaster recovery planning, it's not about technology, it's about the business. So this is where you get the win-win, where we're working and we're aligned as one business unit going forward. The next part of the exercise then is obviously then data and repositories. So we use an online repository where it's a single truth. So everything is dumped there. We book it in, book it out. It's all auditable versions, etc. But it's a shared information repository for all of our disaster recovery activities, projects, etc., etc. So from that, then just the idea of achievements and success. So from taking on a mismatch of disparate systems and information, etc., we put together at this point, the pointer will work again. So we put together a strategy that we could measure ourselves against. We then looked at our applications. So how do we map our applications and updates, and how do we have a standard for engaging the business and working with new applications as they're being published. We then put together a commitment on what disaster recovery testing we can and cannot do and how often we would do it. We mapped our technology capabilities against realistic committed deliverables. We put together a structure that we could work under, a framework that aligns IT to the business. We then created a core tests, etc. We aligned all of our applications to criticality. We had we have a single repository, and then we were able to measure testing. We actually conduct failover testing of critical systems, critical applications, etc., without taking down complete data centers and failing them over. We were able to go in and target specific components of it without affecting day-to-day business. From that, then, just to give you an idea of success, then, so looking at business applications. This pointer again. So there, you can see we've nearly doubled the amount of testing we've done of business applications within these new processes. Our core systems, historically, we had no testing or no idea or understanding of our capabilities within our data centers. We started building out in 2019, and as you see in 2020, we have a huge stack, if you like, of understanding and awareness of our capabilities in that space now. And there again, database testing, we test all our database repositories. They haven't changed much, so there's little movement there. And then our same again, our repositories, then we test them manually, which is ensures the integrity of our ability to restore business-related data. The next then is just how it's grown. So from an initiative to just look at disaster recovery and capabilities and to get a handle on it, it's pretty much become a 5-tiered operation in that we've operational support, we've compliance with regulatory and audit, etc. We've all new standards we've created against disaster recovery. We've a whole strategy, 3-year strategy plan as to how we keep moving forward, and then initiatives as well. So we can actually add to the pot, if you like, from the whole IT division, what initiatives we can bring to the table as well. Something else we did is aligned with a strategic wheel, which is more an organizational strategic wheel, which is around operational standards and compliance at an organization level, and we could map disaster recovery to that as well. So it's worked really well in getting a footprint and an equal stance within IT and the ICOM business as a whole. So this is all well and good. This was all around the tangible deliverables and technology space and mapping to business. But in the event of a disaster, how does it all come together? So the next thing we had to look at then was a playbook. So the playbook in itself is pretty much the human factor. So what happens if there is a disaster? What happens if the data center fails over? What happens if there's an environmental issue, etc. So this playbook then really outlines the who the key players are, what their roles are, what's expected of them, and then the next is all around communication, updating the business, etc., and then recovering services. So to get people, if you like, who are sitting out in the cold, back into the office, back into online again, and working. So this is basically the wrap. What we have, key components would be ownership, communication, awareness, and preparedness. And we have this wrap, and we dry run this on a quarterly basis to make sure that we're still in tune and online with it, and that our communication models work. So it's another page, and that is really just the phases of it, which is activation, notification, damage assessment, execution, reconstitution, and communications, etc. One key factor we realized earlier on as well is business processes and time of month. So for any disaster or even any failover activities is to be cognizant of business processes and what is critical. So payroll, invoicing at the end of the month-end processes, etc. Regulatory reporting, audits, all have an effect on what we can do when and what the impact of an outage would be to the business, etc. So the next steps then would be continuous improvement. So all well and good, but you kind of rest on your laurels. Technologies change, business processes change, and the world moves on. So in a continuous improvement space, we've put some processes there where we do periodic reviews of all of our disaster recovery processes. We, as part of our annual testing of our plans, we look to improve upon them, and that could be automation opportunities or transitioning steps to newer products, etc. We're looking at our data centers themselves. So it's well and good being able to recover components of it, but how can you replicate a data center in another environment? So if like one in Europe and one in the US or one in India, how do you do that? So we're looking at tenant configurations where we can just do a lot more in the disaster recovery space. Looking at technology advancements, so our storage, our processing power, etc. And we're also looking at disaster recovery as a service. So leveraging the likes of Azure and AWS and what benefits they could bring us. And then really that's around a cost versus service expectation type of model, but looking at that as well. And then so we're open to ideas as to how to improve it and how to bring it forward with the organization as it grows. That's pretty much it. I know it's a death by PowerPoint, but just a quick run through of how we've approached it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed seeing that quick whirlwind tour, if you like, in 20 minutes.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much, Bill, for that. It was certainly a practical approach to disaster recovery, and I think that really complemented Antonia's presentation from earlier. I do have a question from the audience. I think midpoint through the presentation, you talked about tiers, and the question is, what approach have you taken to determine the different tiers to which you referenced?
The approach was around the capabilities. So so if you look at data, just pure data buckets themselves. So if we're replicating that data, the technology we could have 30 seconds, a minute, an hour. What's the replication intervals? Is it real time? Is it delayed? So that gives you an idea of how quickly can you access that data from a different bucket. So if we've one in the US and one in Europe, so how long does it take to replicate the latest change across the Atlantic? That would be really your recovery point is there and then. So it's really measuring that. And then what what type of storage are they going to pay for? Are they going to pay for high-speed storage or et cetera, et cetera? So it's cost versus availability. So we have different models for different storage mediums. And then from that, we just know ourselves from testing what their recoverability is, and we can put those stacks together. So for our highest availability tier 1, we can say we're doing real-time replication. We've got standby environments, which are our hot standbys, and it's a case of we can fail you over completely, and then it's a case of scripts then to remap all your pointers to the alternative data center where the user then can start plugging away once more. The next then would be a lesser version of it. So it's like buying a car. It's have you all the bells and whistles or not? So the next then would be you need to spin up servers. They're not sitting there, so then you have to go and virtually create them and start from scratch. And the third then is really it's a generic approach. So you're taking terabytes of data and you're hoping that you're storing if you like a complete file or array. All the application data is going to be recovered in that space without looking for the specific entity, if you like.
Okay,
and then we're all
brilliant.
constantly
Thank
looking at that as to how we can improve upon it to give the business higher commitments, etc.
you. Thank you. Thanks. That's a really comprehensive answer. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Bill, and thank you for sharing your experiences. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Now, it gives me great pleasure to just finish off a brilliant morning so far by introducing our next speaker, Lior Avni, who is Global Incident Manager at Get. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today, Lior.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. I'm very much looking forward to listening to your presentation in your kind of Tom Cruise persona about how Get manages incident management. And I suppose I'm really hopeful that your presentation doesn't self-destruct after 30 seconds. So we can see your screen, so we are over to you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. And let's hope. So hello, good morning, good almost lunch, everyone. I'm Lior from Get, the ride-hailing company. I run the Global Incident Management Program at Get Escalation Management. And I would like to share with you both our incident management process and how it evolved when you can't see anyone in person anymore for the past 6 months. So we'll be going a little bit on the Get story, the tech stack, the challenges we face, the process, the cultural shift we had to undergo, if time allows, about our vision, but maybe a few questions during. So who am I? Unix fan, as you can guess, 45 years of age, happy family guy, taking care of escalations for the better part of 20 years now. Love to cook, music, and a proud sci-fi geek. Most of you are British, so you know what don't panic means. A little bit about the Get story. I have to say this is quite strange talking to my computer instead of a crowd. I'll try to manage it. Get, founded at 2010 by Dave Weiser and Roy Moore as a solution to get people from point A to point B very fast through public transportation, taxis. Google Israel became its first B2B customer. 2012, Get Taxi, back then, branches out to Moscow, raising an additional funds for the C&D rounds. 2015, important year, we rebranded as Get Concept, get you everything you need. 2016, expanding to the UK, acquiring radio taxis, now running over 50% of all black cabs in London. 2017, we launched our startup within Get Delivery, and thus completing the whole get you what everything you need, from taxi to carpooling to packages. 2018 was a good year for us, becoming contribution margin positive, ridden 1 billion kilometer on the Get platform, and that brings us to today. No need to go over the tech stack. You all know what these little icons and images mean. Most of you have them on your laptops. No need to get here. And let's dive right into the challenges that we face. So the system is huge, and I do mean huge. We have 3 monoliths, 180 microservices, which keep on expanding as we try to break the monolith down. B2C, B2B services on a 24/7 system, multi-geolocations. We are active in Moscow, or Russia, UK, and Israel. Many third-party components that comprise this whole production system. We are fully CI/CD, which means dozens of daily deployments per day. We strive for a 4 nines uptime SLA, which we need to monitor. And all of that needs a very good functioning incident management process. Oh, and one more small challenge, our not so nice friend, COVID-19. So let's talk about the Get incident management process, where we were and what we had to become. So rather where we were not, we did not have an organized incident management process. It was run in crisis mode. We did not have a single point of authority. There was a crisis. Everyone jumped on board, made suggestions, tried to be helpful. Not always in that order, and it's not always helpful to get many voices who want to share the same thing. And we had no dedicated way to learn, since incidents were opened as bugs, no postmortem on everything, just on demand. We basically had to go from here to here, and I owe this to my son. I promised him I will share Fireman Sam with everyone. And in the last 6 months, we had to become this guy, okay? This was a mission impossible, and we had to overcome a few obstacles. Our production ecosystem is made of the support and DevOps engineers, which support R&D, all the engineers, the actual coders, the service owners, which in turn will support our customer care operators. We have roughly 200 customer care operators who serve tens of thousands of riders and drivers. It's a very big and very complex production system. So we created our incident management process based on 3 pillars. Proactivity, okay? We monitor everything, and what we don't monitor, we create monitors for. Be it a business monitor or an application monitor using Grafana, New Relic, and Datadog. Next pillar is connectivity. Everyone, okay, everyone is connected through escalation policies, which are created per service, per owner, and on dedicated communication channels. I have to say, I really connected to what Adam mentioned earlier. You can't have too many communication channels, and what you do have needs to be very organized. So we use dedicated communication channels per dedicated groups. Not everyone is on every communication channel. The last pillar, and in my view, the most important one, is transparency. Okay, root cause analysis is mandatory. Publishing that root cause analysis on company level is mandatory. Presenting it to management every week, this was the week in production, is mandatory. We use Atlassian Jira for that purpose. All our incidents are managed there. Everything is presented in clear dashboards with trends. Every root cause analysis is derived from the incident itself, quite easy and quite useful to manage. This is a high-level diagram of our incident management flow, and I want to take actual notice that resolving the incident, I mean putting out the fire, quote unquote, does not mean that the incident is closed. The incident may be resolved, it's not closed, until the root cause analysis is done, until action items are all implemented. Sorry, I have to drink a little bit. Sorry about that. All the action items are resolved. The incident is not closed. Okay, very important. Now, I take not a small amount of pride in this slide. This is the root cause analysis form. As Winston Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Everything is documented. Every production affecting incident is documented. Okay. It has a root cause analysis. It sometimes can be a short root cause analysis, meaning, I don't know, a bot attack, a crash in a Kubernetes pod, or it can be a longer root cause analysis because done due to a change that was not tested, everything that had to go from the start to finish. These are all the events, this is all the data that we publish in this incident, and it's sent company-wide, okay? Now we apply a blameless type of root cause analysis, not who caused it, but who solved it. Everything is in the wording, okay? We say who solved it, who was beneficial in fixing it, and what are the action items? Very important. Now, there are three perspectives to incident management at Get: the day-to-day, the during, and the post-incident tasks. So for R&D, their day-to-day should be creating monitors, plugging potential leaks, and of course, deploy with care. Test before you deploy, not after. During an incident, it is up to the service owner, of course, after the incident manager calls an incident and starts managing the incident, the actual engineer needs to find the root cause, eliminate it, and deploy a fix if needed. Post-incident is, of course, to produce a detailed root cause analysis. My team and myself, as incident managers, we produce a high-level root cause analysis, but it is up to the service engineer to actually write what part of the code was bad, why was that missed, implement any action items, and of course, learn all the time. For the incident managers and support, our day-to-day means watching the system carefully, customizing the system if needed, and stop hazardous deployment, which synergize with deploy with care. If we are aware of a deployment that can potentially cause a problem, we have a change management process which says you deploy it either on this time of day where there are no peaks in traffic, or during night in a maintenance job. During an incident, again, sorry, we detect the incident, we get the ball rolling. This is sort of an internal company pun. Every get we have is with 2 T's, and we manage the incident. Post-incident tasks is to produce a high-level root cause analysis, set the action items once our post-mortem meetings are done, and to orchestrate the implementation of said action items, meaning follow up on it on Jira, give the occasional nudge to the engineer, have you implemented this already, escalate it if needed, and make sure everything is working again. And for management, which is no less important, their job all over, day-to-day, during and post, review, prioritize if needed, and of course commit to the process, because processes are all well and good, but if you do not have the commitment of the powers that be, which means the VP R&D or a CTO or anyone who's in charge of the R&D organization, this will not work. This is a joint effort. Everyone is on board. Now, the interesting part, the changes that we apply to the process during COVID-19. So I've written in my previous blogs that monitoring is very important. Your APM tools and your business monitors are your boots on the ground, okay? I could call them a they. They are our friends, the APMs. They watch the system, okay, and they alert you. But COVID created havoc on everything, okay? The decreased business, it changed thresholds, made a mess. So we need to keep our eyes open, modify any alerts thresholds, communicate with our third-party providers, okay? You all have your third-party providers, your cloud operators, the database supporters. We need to make sure we are all synced and the alerts are correct and they actually tell you that something is wrong, so we can fight any other fatigues that we have. Okay, it was a rough month from March to April, okay? What we tweaked and we managed. Transparency, okay, very important. Don't keep secrets, okay? Don't keep knowledge to yourself, share. We do not see everyone at the office as we used to. We can't just shout from one cube to the other, from one open space, hey, you know, something's going on. We are away. So we need to make sure that we always know what's going on in our production system. There's a risky deployment, there's a new feature rollout, maintenance works and schedule. You need to know, and you can make sure the production is ready for it. Share everything you know with your team, your organization, your company, everything. Because when you're together in everything, you win big, even when the mission seems impossible. See what I did here? Communication when you can't see anyone. Continuing on my previous slide. There's no shoulder to shoulder anymore. The shoulder is a health risk, okay? So virtual war rooms are the new norm. Be it the Google Hangout, Zoom, Teams, whichever technology you employ, this has to be your go-to, okay? So be prompt, precise, know what you're reporting on, take a few minutes, okay, a minute or two, not more. Research, know that there's an actual incident, raise the flag, okay? You don't understand what's going on in 10 minutes, that's when you zoom it up. Don't wait. You can't walk to the developer anymore. We all have to meet virtually, okay? And of course, communicate it to the managers. An actual phone call, okay? In the middle of the night, texting or slacking from Slack, you know, may not be enough, okay? You may need to actually raise the phone and call your manager. Or the message will self-destruct with a SIP1 incident. The cultural shift, if I can put it into diagrams, okay, meant that with incident managers, tech support, tier 2 and 3, managing regional customer care, working with DBAs, R&D, DevOps, QA, if you need to test any fix that you had, means that you had to employ trust, collaboration, and transparency. Or in other words, you have to be this guy because my son also likes super rings. So I'm sharing everything we see here at home during lockdown. What's next? Okay, it's a very good question. It's a brave new world, okay? We are not sure what will happen, whether we will get back to the office completely, whether it's a hybrid culture from now on. Will we see each other in person? I'm actually quite optimistic, okay? But maybe that's just me, but I see the technology, I see the efforts, and I'm sure that the day will come when we are back at our knock, at our office, kicking butts to production incidents and making sure that everything will be okay again, face to face, and make the mission accomplished. I would like to conclude my session here with one plagiarized for agreements from the one and only Matt Stratton. I mean, I really follow this guy, and this is the first person I actually met when I started the world of incident management, and really stuck those 4 agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally, okay? It's a job, it's not family. Don't make assumptions. That's from another movie also, but I think you know what I mean. And always do your best when you fight. And this one is actually my 4 core pillars. Be humble, be positive, be a pro, get things done, as I said, the double T. Combine it all with collaboration, okay? You are not alone here. There is no I in team. Work together. And brainstorm with the secret sauce of transparency, and you can do everything. You can manage any production incident that falls your way. Questions? I try to stay online on my timeline.
Lovely.
I'll be happy to hear questions.
Thank you for that presentation, and thank you for finishing with those pillars. You know, I think they will really resonate with the audience today, and I think what's come across from all the presentations so far this morning really is about that need for transparency, you know, the need for collaboration even more so now, and really the need to understand, you know, the communication channels and who your stakeholders are at any part in the process. And I think being humble is something that we should all consider all of the time. So thank you very much for sharing. That's brilliant. We don't have any questions for you. So thank you again for sharing that. I'm delighted that your presentation didn't self-destruct after 30 seconds. So as I say, I'd like to say thank you to Laura. That finishes the presentations for this morning. So we now go to a short lunch break. We'll be back at 12:40, so that gives you an opportunity to grab a quick cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and perhaps something to eat, and we will see you back here at 12:40. Thank you for taking part this morning. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to today's experience event on disaster recovery. Hope you had an opportunity to grab a cup of tea or grab a cup of coffee and potentially get something to eat. Before I introduce our first speaker of the afternoon, I just want to mention that Emma's very kindly posted a message today about some research that SDI is carrying out, supporting the digital business and the drive towards digital transformation. It would be brilliant if at some point over the next couple of days, you could actually take the time to fill in some responses to the survey that we're putting together, which will support that research. So thank you very much, guys. So I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker for this afternoon. Kelechi Igboko is Director of Technology Risk and Resilience at PwC UK, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing how PwC align IT and the business when it comes to service continuity. Welcome, Kelechi.
Thank you, Tessa. Thanks for the kind introduction.
How are you? Oh, my
I'm good,
pleasure.
thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Well, we can see your screen and your audio seems to be working perfectly, so I will hand over to you.
That's perfect. I mean, at least I've passed the first test, right? My resilience works and
Brilliant.
I can work, so I've got the right to speak here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Let's talk about operational resilience. I mean, it's a topic that has got lots of momentum in recent years. Lots of people are talking about it. And I think not least of all because of the high profile operational IT failures that have happened across multiple industries. Financial services is where I spend the most of my time, and that's where the buzzword resilience is used a lot, and that's because the regulator is hot on it. But actually, issues are prevalent across sectors. Whether it's TSB, where customers couldn't access their bank accounts or make payments or transfer funds online, with the failure there, or BA, which we had the issues where because of the failure of the check-in and flight management system. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Hello?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you okay. We had a little sound issue about 30 seconds ago, but I think I can hear you fine now. So would you like to carry on? And if we have any more, I'll just interrupt you if that's okay and let you know.
That's perfect. I'll go ahead. So yeah, I was just talking about, BA, where we had the major issues with the flight cancellation and all of that because of an IT system that failed. So really, some of this high-profile public incidents has made resilience something that is critical in our minds as consumers, but also, useful for us as professionals as well who work in the space providing services to customers. So with that in mind, then, what does resilience mean? I've tried a definition here which says operational resilience is the embedding of capabilities, processes, behaviors, and systems that allow a firm to continue to carry out its mission regardless of in face of disruption, regardless of the source. Now, it's a lot of words, but effectively what we're trying to say is that resilience is an organization's ability to protect and sustain your core services that are key for your customers and stakeholders, both during BAU and when something bad happens, like an operational stress or disruption. So some really important things to note there. So resilience is an outcome or a capability. It's not a function or a process or a person, right? It's more than just business continuity or disaster recovery, even though those are really important components for operational resilience. A really important thing is that resilience isn't just about fixing things when they go wrong, the reactive side, but you also have the proactive side of resilience, which is what can you do to enable the business prepare and prevent things from going wrong in the first place and reduce the likelihood of failure. And right at the heart of resilience is the customer and the service. It's not about making money and the likes, even though those are associated consequences, but really it's about being able to continue to do what you do for those who consume what you produce or what you make or what you provide. So really at the bottom there, what I've tried to do is highlight the key things that could lead to resilience issues. So it could be a stress on your business day to day, so growing volumes, growing demand, slight bips in operation, or it could be more significant issues that happen where you have major disruption to systems, to services and the likes, and things that do go wrong. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is protect yourself from these things going wrong in advance, adapt and absorb shocks when they happen, or continue and recover when they do happen as well. So with that in mind, so we kind of have a definition, we're clear as to what we're trying to achieve, which is service continuity. What does a framework for resilience look like? Now, many of us will have business continuity teams, risk teams, operational teams within our businesses that are championing, designing or implementing operational resilience as a concept. But what does that really mean? What would a framework look like? What's it made up of? Now, the graphic on screen right now is busy, and it's busy for a reason. It's meant to show the complexity on what it takes to achieve operational resilience. It highlights the different concerns and risks that could lead to service failure. So right at the top, we're trying to work out what is the scope of resilience. Now, we've established that it's about critical customer services and products. And the objective really is to ensure that these products are available, that they perform at the right levels, that they're responsive, and that they can be recovered if they do fail. How do you do it? Well, you do it by understanding what exactly it is you do and how you do it, right? So it's about end-to-end business processes. The key thing about resilience is you can't focus all your efforts on making one side of your operations or one element of a service resilient, because you're effectively as strong as the weakest point in the link. So the key thing with operational resilience is how do you make end-to-end business processes, end-to-end business services resilient so that you do not have one failure affecting other areas. Now, to do that, you need to understand the pillars that make up a service. So that's typically the facilities or premises, the people who do the work, the systems, technology you use to do it, and also the suppliers or third parties you rely on. Once again, if any of these fails, the service will fail, or if any of these are degraded, the service will be degraded. So you need to understand this so that you can focus on it. But then what about the functions and the disciplines that contribute? So we have things like business continuity, we have things like disaster recovery, we have things like incident management. I'm sure you've heard a fair bit about them today because today is a DR day. Now, those directly speak to how you respond and recover if you had an IT failure or a system failure or a service failure. But what else goes into resilience? We've got other concepts like cybersecurity, right? Now, cybersecurity is important because it's a major threat that tends to lead to service failures, whether it's a denial of service attack on your systems or an attack on your databases, someone trying to steal data, but at the same time disrupts access to them, which means that people who provide services using that data can't reach it. It's about supply continuity. So if you have a supplier who's providing a critical service to you or a critical component of a service you provide to customers, if the supplier fails, the service fails. So really, resilience isn't just within an organization's boundaries. It goes beyond that, also speaks to how they provide a service, and in certain cases, it will be via supply chains. And that one I'll pick on is change management. So change is a good thing. Change is a way you bring about positive improvements to services or improvements. You launch new products, launch new services. But effectively, change, if not managed properly, could lead to unintended consequences. The number of times when resilience issues or IT failures have been the result of upgrades that have gone wrong, change is not being properly tested, or actually in the process of creating one new functionality, you break existing functionality, means that resilience has to be a core consideration when implementing change projects so that you don't break it you don't break things when you're trying to fix something else. But all of this should sit within a governance framework. It should all be aligned to your strategy, because what's most important to the business, the board, the customer should be really what you should focus on your resilience efforts and investments on. And ultimately, it should link to cultures and behaviors. So we're talking about ownership of resilience. Resilience isn't something that should be owned by a particular function, a particular individual. It pretty much is everybody's business, because everyone has to be out there spotting issues, identifying issues, and contributing to the goals. So that's a framework. You need to, if you're going to build operational resilience, you need to think about all of these things to make sure that you are looking at the full sphere and you're not missing out any parts. So next thing is how with that in mind, how does IT service management support an organization's resilience goals? I've highlighted 4 key things to think about. The first step is you need to understand what you're protecting and why. Now, there's a classic challenge, with IT in the business. Business doesn't understand us. We don't understand them. We don't seem to be speaking the same language. That flows through a number of areas. It flows through the core of IT service delivery, but also it should flow through the core of resilience as well. So as service desk managers, as service managers, as delivery specialists, you'll be inundated by requests, calls, issues, service requests, and ultimately you should be able to get to the heart of what the impacts are to your end customers and prioritize what's most important. So you need to understand what your key services are. You need to understand what the people, premises, technology, suppliers that underpin those services are. You need to be able to set appetite, or you need to understand what the appetites and tolerances are for disruption. So effectively, if you have 2 requests or 2 incidents, and one of them affects a service where the appetite for failure is very, very low, so it needs to be always on, then that should be the priority. But you need to understand what has been set by the business as a priority so that you can actually focus your efforts accordingly. Now, recognizing that resilience is complex and there are many moving parts, it's key that you understand what those moving parts are. We've talked about a couple of them already, and it's key that effectively what you want to do is make sure that you understand how these work together, understand how they contribute to the service, so that when something fails and you need to have an intervention, or when you're informing the approach to doing things, you are seeing it in context. How does the service desk work with the security professionals? How does the service desk work with the risk professionals? How does physical security affect anything else? Where is the data hosted? Where are the systems hosted? What changes are going to happen and therefore will affect the services that you implement now? What has happened in the past by way of incidents? That means that when something is being done more recently, you go, well, the last time it happened, we broke X, so let's try not to do it again. So getting a view of all of these component parts is really, really key. I'll pick on one we that didn't do before. Capacity management is another interesting one. So as services professionals, you have a view of how services are delivered. You have a view of what's failed, and you have a view of where challenges exist in the chain. So where you have enough capacity to supply to meet demands that you need, or where you've had things falling over because the systems couldn't handle it. I'll take a classic example. One of my clients launched a new product, an FS provider. It was a new savings product, really, really popular with the market. And of course, there was massive customer take-up when it went on because they were the only ones providing the service. Now, no one had bothered to check with the IT teams as to whether the existing systems could handle the new traffic or the increased traffic, whether the service desk had enough people to handle calls from customers. And in effect, what started off as a really good idea to launch a new product, which ended up being popular, so from a marketing perspective was the right thing, ended up being a real challenge for the organization. So really, it's important that we understand what these component parts are that could affect the way services are delivered, and therefore could either be a good thing or a source of resilience, risk, or failure. I mean, the COVID website issue is another one, right? So going on the COVID website to tests, to book tests. But when it was launched on the first day and within hours, this website wasn't on days and had to be taken down, that just speaks about a resilience issue. It looks about a failure in understanding the capacity concerns and utilization potential of new services and new products. Now, when we know what we're trying to protect, we identify all the component parts. The key thing for us as service management professionals is to engage with the process, engage with the process of designing services. Now, the key thing for me is understanding that you as service managers, you are the interface to customers, so you understand the frustrations. You're also at the heart of incidents. Most reports come to you. You understand the nature of the requests, so that the insights you have is critical to the operations in other areas. It's critical to where things are designed. You know what could go wrong. You know what's gone wrong in the past. You know what feedback you get from your customers. You know the nature of the support requirements. And therefore, effectively, you are in a unique position to create this feedback loop where, one, you highlight where things have gone wrong before. You highlight where things could go wrong. You highlight what's worked well. But effectively, you're feeding into the product design process. you're feeding into testing processes, you're feeding into to make sure that these initiatives are not done with just a limited view of what the impacts could be. And finally, there is the element of responding. So if something does go wrong, how do you act, right? So how do you manage incidents, manage problems, drive root cause analysis, activate the elements of DR, communicate with who you need to. Now, I won't talk through DR crisis management because you've heard a lot about it today. But in effect, you understanding what's important, being able to prioritize and being able to engage with recovery efforts would also mean that the whole objective of resilience is a lot more effective and it works better. So in a sense, 4 key things: understand, identify, engage, and act as you need to around resilience. I've spoken a fair bit about it. I thought it would be useful to just leave you with some common interesting anecdotes I've picked up as part of resilience work I've done with a number of clients. You recognize some of these. So we have contracts in place with our suppliers. Surely that's enough, right? Well, a contract never stops a system from failing or a service from going wrong. We'll just make everything resilient. Well, if everything is resilient, nothing is resilient. No organization has unlimited funds to throw into spending massive tons to replicate everything, duplicate everything, and make sure nothing fails. So really, at the heart of resilience is understanding what's important so you can prioritize not just efforts, but also funds. I'm not worried about key person dependencies. Our people rarely leave. That was what was said by one of my clients just before the 2 key people involved in the process we were working on left, and they left together. So that's an interesting one. I think the key thing there is don't have a blind spot around what could fail and where things could go wrong, right? Understand that people are important, systems are important, processes are important, suppliers are important, and facilities are important as well. So don't focus on one and leave the other with assumptions that aren't proven, like people will never leave. Our systems are resilient because they're in the cloud. I'll just leave that one there. And we haven't tested it, but I know it will work. Is another key one. If it's not validated, it probably won't work. Now, if you feel uncomfortable about something, if you've been told something works, if you've been told, well, if it fails, we can fail over to another data center, or we've got this X in place as a secondary system, or we've got a secondary supplier who can provide a service. You've heard of these things as solutions. But if they haven't been proven, if they've never been used in anger, to what extent are you comfortable that they will work when they need to work? And of course, there's the conventional one where we've never had a major disasters. It won't happen to us. It hasn't happened before. It won't happen now. Touch wood. I suspect that's probably something very few people will say anymore, because no one expected prior to a few months ago that would have a global pandemic that would affect affect the whole world really, and cripple many businesses, change our operating models and the likes. So with any luck, that wouldn't be said anymore, but we should be challenging some assumptions as to what could happen and what won't happen. So as a final point, I just want to give a summary as to some of the things I've highlighted today that are useful takeaways as you go away on your day-to-day business. First of all is focus, right? What matters most in the business? Because if it matters to the business, it matters to IT. If it matters to IT, it matters to the service desk. And those are the things that will be highlighted if they fail. So the key thing is to understand what your critical applications are, what your critical services are, and the user experiences that you identify via the services, do they match with the resilience priorities of your business? If they don't, there's an opportunity for you to challenge them and actually bring your insights to feed into that. But it's useful for you to understand as well, so that you're prepared and you're not surprised when people are highlighting things that that you wouldn't think are important, because someone somewhere has said these are business priorities. Alignment. So have you identified different components that are critical to delivering an end-to-end service, the key parts of your value chain, and the things that need to be made resilient? Now, it's good to understand them, it's good to understand how they work, and it's good to understand how they fit together, which helps with things like diagnosis, helps with things like answering, but also helps you to refer things to the right areas as well. Feedback is important. The feedback loop is key, right? Are you proactively using your team's knowledge of incidents, of customers, of systems and operations to inform the approach to resilience? You've got a wealth of knowledge. You've seen it go wrong. You've seen it go right. If you're not feeding this back to the design of the process. You're constantly going to have things kicked across the field to IT ops, which will in turn become issues that you have to deal with in the service desk. So as you understand and as you gain your insights and awareness as to how things are run and how things should be run, you should feed these back to the relevant areas. So that will probably mean engaging with your risk teams. That would mean engaging with your business continuity teams. That will mean engaging with your IT operations teams, your architecture teams and the like, to say, this is what I'm seeing, and therefore, please build that into the design because it will make things better. A couple of more. Are you looking at your metrics, your data, your root cause analysis to identify where your real gaps are and where you're carrying risks? Now, there's lots of insights in the data you've got. Use it, but actually analyze it. Look at trends. Look at trends and use those to inform the future strategy. And finally, are you contributing to validation? Have you participated in testing activities of your systems and services to understand whether they can withstand, adapt, and recover? So DR testing, business continuity testing, service continuity testing, but also operational implementation testing, transition, and the likes. You should be key and critical to those because ultimately, like I said, if you're in the service desk, it will come back to you when it does go wrong. So hopefully that gives you some things to think about, talking about operational resilience from the business side, but also how you as an IT function or as an IT service desk function fits into that. I'll just stop now and take questions if that works.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much for that presentation, Kelechi. I really enjoyed some of those common misconceptions, and I think I had a chuckle. I'm sure lots of our audience had a chuckle at some of those as well. So thank you very much for sharing those. And also, it is really timely to highlight that, resilience, as you say, goes beyond the boundaries of an organisation and is actually everybody's responsibility and everybody's business. It doesn't just fall to one person or one department. So thank you for reminding us of that at this very timely moment. So I don't think we have any questions. So I would just like to say thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for joining us today and to wish you a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much, Kelechi.
Thank you too. It's good to chat with you. Have a good day now.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So our next presentation and our final presentation from the day is from Daniel Breston, who is an IT management advisor. Daniel's got a real wealth of real-life disaster recovery experiences, and this, I think, will be a really brilliant session to wrap up today's event. Now, Daniel's presentation is very interactive. So guys, this is only going to work and work really well if you can post Daniel your questions. So please post some questions whilst Daniel's delivering his presentation, and I will answer them when we come to the end of his session. So now I'd just like to hand over to Daniel. We can see his screen and I don't think he's on mute. Afternoon, Daniel.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Tessa, and I'm glad to hear that you were going to answer all the questions they were going to ask. Thank you for that.
Definitely not. I'll be handing them straight over to you, but I just wanted to remind everybody that your session will be interactive and it's only going to work really well if they can have the time to kind of ask you those questions. So I will hand over to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Appreciate everybody hanging in there until the very last session. I do realize that I'm the last speaker before the rest of your day. So I am going to go rather fast, but I want to leave time to answer a bunch of questions from just about anything that you might have heard today to get some input. I'm not going to introduce myself right now. I'm going to leave that even to the end. We're just going to get started. So in my career, which started many centuries ago, I've managed 11 data centers servicing hundreds of thousands of individuals across the universe. And I listed just a few of the incidents that I've had in my career. All of them triggered some type of business continuity or triggered some type of IT disaster recovery. Some of those are obvious. Some of those, my IT was up, but the business couldn't necessarily get to them, in which case then the business had an issue, in which case then my IT disaster recovery planning or solutions were inadequate. And that led to, a bunch of discussions, a bunch of different ways of trying to work. So for instance, if your main data centers are split between Chicago and New York, and Chicago overnight has 22 inches of snow and nobody can get into work, we had to be able to switch to New York and run seamlessly in New York, even though we were all still in Chicago. How do you do that? Because you have to have the right type of communications and you have to have the right types of things in place. And yet this was in the early 90s. So, the World Wide Web and all these great communication packages that we take for granted now weren't available. So the design for that, and the reason why I'm telling you this story, is that IT disaster recovery, business continuity, is iterative. It's daily. You do not know what is going to happen next. There is no normal. There is no going back to normal. There's only next. And with that type of culture in place, and it does take time to build that type of culture, you're able to overcome some of these incidents, no matter how comical they might be, like the CIO powering off the data center while he was giving a tour to the board. But you have to be able to address these things. So let's look at next. The election. Kaleku rightfully mentioned that websites are one of the things that get hit the hardest. And if you're not ready for them to scale up to a reasonable degree, you're going to anger individuals. Brexit's going to have the same problem. People are going to go to government websites. People are going to try to find out what the news is happening. The economic recession that's happening now. Not everybody can afford to work from home. Not everybody wants to work from home. Not everybody can co-educate their kids from home. Going out of business. Your company might be going out of business. You might be looking at redundancy, in which case then the last thing you want to do is to set up cameras or an office space in your house to figure out how to make money. You want to be doing something else. So, going out of business of your own company is one thing. Going out of business of your suppliers. If a major supplier goes bust, or if a major supplier has issues, what is your plan B? And how many of you can raise your hands and say that you've tested that plan B? Every time you've done a business continuity test, you've included your major suppliers and you've included your plan B. Every time. This is what's necessary nowadays to be able to keep a business in business. Business continuity. The simplest definition in the world, the continuity of business. And the technology of being able to deal with that IT technology, you're in charge of, and taking advantage of digital, taking advantage of telephone wires with cups at either end. Whatever you have to do, these are the things that you're going to be challenged for over the next few months, years, throughout your career. I've given you the boring definitions here. You can read those. You can look them up in Wikipedia. If you don't know about the Business Continuity Institute or the IT Disaster Recovery Institute or the Disaster Recovery Institute, I strongly suggest that you become members. They have loads and loads and loads of information, loads and loads and loads of templates that you can get, and books and speaker events and stuff like that for you to learn from, as well as of course, the continuing education that we receive from the Service Desk Institute. But your goal should be, don't use these definitions. Do not use these definitions. Get a group of individuals into a room in your organization and create your own definition. Find a way of saying what is business continuity and what is IT disaster recovery, high level, to your organization. Why are we doing this? Create your vision. How are we going to make this relevant to the rest of the organization? Create your tactical strategy. And then what do we have to do every single day to make sure that our business continuity and IT disaster recovery is designed and tested such that the resiliency, adaptability, and sustainability of our organization is allowing staff and vendors to help our customers and to help our staff do things safely when we have a disruption. I mean, you have to go and create your own way of thinking about this, and then you have to get a way of selling it, and you have to think about putting that definition into your contracts, into your service level agreements if you use them, into your customer level agreements, which I hope everybody has, so that everyone knows. The biggest marketing campaign that you can possibly run right now, think about this, is to go public and go, we have a business continuity plan. We welcome you to look at it anytime you'd like. I mean, think about the power of that statement right now. Customers would flock to you because you've now promised that you're going to be there for them and that you have a plan that they can go and look at and that they can review. It's a very brave thing to do, but I know of a certain bank that went from the third largest bank in the great state of Texas to the first largest bank in the great state of Texas in a month, 6.5 million accounts in 4 weeks, because we were not ashamed of our business continuity plan. And our IT disaster recovery underpinned that. So where do you start? I start with the service desk, frankly. I'm not saying that because this is the Service Desk Institute. I've been an IT director for countless years and a consultant for countless more. But the service desk is the only place in your organization where you can actually find out what the truth is. You can find out what works and what doesn't work, what makes your customers happy and what doesn't make your customers happy, what annoys your staff in the organization. And please stop saying IT in the business. You're all part of the same thing. You know, what makes your staff annoyed inside your organization? Where are things breaking? Who fixes things better than other people? What vendors are good vendors or bad? You have all of that information in one source of truth. Use it. Go into it on a very regular basis, create searches and say, if this breaks, we're going to not be able to keep our business in business. And because of that, we need to fix it. Something to fix it needs to be introduced in the next sprint. And the same with your organization of vendors. There's a great knowledge of being able to manage vendors, service integration and management, SIAM. It allows you to create an organization that works with vendors in such a way that they help keep you out of trouble. So we used to rely on Hewlett-Packard. We relied on Hewlett-Packard for all kinds of stuff. And we wrote into our contract that Hewlett-Packard was going to have to participate in our business continuity or IT disaster recovery test. Sometimes they were just whiteboard sessions, in which case then we would invite them to the session so that they could comment. Sometimes they were real. We also wrote into the contract that if we asked them during a test to deliver something to us, we were timing them. And as long as we didn't open it, we could give it back to them and there would be just the transportation cost associated with that for us. They did not always know that it was a test. They just knew that they were always being timed and that they did not want to fall foul of anything that happened. I've done this with countless vendors. And if vendors don't want to play with you to that extent, I would strongly suggest that you might want to find a vendor that is more going to be a partner for you and dump the vendor that says, no, I don't want to be part of these things, because you can't trust them. And the last thing you need to worry about when you're having a disruptive event is trust. Think about Chaos Monkey. For those of you who know Netflix, think about the fact that the majority of their infrastructure used to be in Amazon data centers. So if Amazon had a glitch, and it was guaranteed that every 9 months Amazon would have a major glitch, sorry, Amazon, you have improved greatly. Netflix didn't always care. They could turn things off and turn things back on, turn off environments, turn environments back on, turn off data storage units and turn data storage units back on. And they tested this. And they started with the concept of a little monkey that would just kind of run around and turn something off. That was the name of their code, until they had a whole army of gorillas and stuff going through and killing things. I'm not suggesting that people follow that exact same model, but I am suggesting that you do that in your thinking. Where are your single points of failure? Look for people as well. Look for teams, look for vendors, look for stakeholders, look for customers. If a certain customer group is not able to get to you for whatever reason that's completely outside of your control, what is the impact to your organization and how are you going to help them from an IT perspective or a business perspective? That is part of continuity and IT disaster recovery. You need to be able to test these things. You need to figure out all different types of ways of testing these things. And to be honest with you, the simplest way for me to ever figure out how to do this was that we would test our continuity as we introduced every sprint of work. We automated portions of our business continuity and IT disaster recovery testing so that we knew that when we released something, it was in a recoverable state if we needed it, and it was in a usable state if customers needed it. And we knew that again because the service desk, of course, was always involved in all of our tests. They were able to ensure continuity for us, if nothing else. So we had backup service desk. We had people that could work from home. We had an outsourced vendor that was ready to go for us. I mean, you're doing all of this for the customers of your organization. You need to make sure that it's there. The indicators of performance that are key are those that are relevant to your customer. I'm going to say that again. The indicators of performance that are key are those that are relevant to your customer. Your customer wants to be able to come to you and use your services. So what is the maximum acceptable outage that a service can be off before you really, really, really annoy people or put a lot of people at risk? I don't want to mention a specific industry, but think about an event that you might have read about in the news a couple of years ago, where hundreds of thousands of people weren't able to get from point A to point B because of an IT issue, an IT data center issue. They did get it back up within the 2-hour service level agreement, but by that time, people were stuck all over the place. Okay, so you don't want to be guilty of the operation was a success, but the patient died. What you want to do instead is you want to create a way of understanding and qualifying and quantifying what do you need. And then because of that, you need to go back and go, well, maybe I don't need all of this. Netflix does this. If they have a major issue, they will turn off services or they will slow down services. They will increase the accepted length of time that you might have to get a web refresh, okay, to try to get as many people as possible serviced, but it's just going to run a little bit slower. And they do that until they're all back up again. So they understand what their recovery time objective is for these services, their full recovery time objective. And they also understand what data they need, what type of data they need, where to get that data, and how long it takes to get that data and restore that data, and how it takes to get that data, restore that data and make sure that it's good data before they let people on. So these 4 indicators, I think, are the best indicators that you should derive your business continuity and IT disaster recovery plans from. You might want to go shift left thinking. Find a newspaper story. You should be able to find a continuity story just about any day of the week. And think about the impact to IT. Read that story and go, this is what happened to them. If this happened to us, what would be the impact? This is how long it took for customers to be annoyed. How long would our customers take to be annoyed at us? And then work backwards until you have a tested plan that people can use on a regular basis to be able to keep your business in business. So my test, my best tips, test the test that you're testing. Don't be afraid of automation. Automate what you're doing. I go into customers now and they're running some big Excel-based or form-based business impact analysis process. And by the time they go and create the report, it's out of sync because 6 sprints have gone by. Stop your business impact analysis. Instead, look at going around to all the staff in your organization on a regular basis. This is what a CEO used to do at a very large bank that I worked for. He would go to almost any employee that he could find, and he would simply ask the question, if we had some sort of issue, are you able to service customers tomorrow? Are we in business tomorrow? And he would listen to what they say. He would write down suggestions, and then he would go back and he would work with his senior management team to prioritize those actions. And he used that to create the right type of communication to people. He used that to create the right type of plans that were put into place to keep us in business and to keep our reputation up. IT disaster recovery is a reputation and marketing tool for your organization. I love a disaster because if it doesn't go right and they haven't listened to you, you can go back and you can go, well, guys, can I have the money now? Can I have the staff now? Can I prioritize this, please? Can we go and talk to the service desk and get what their view was of what just happened? In fact, can we just make it a habit of going and talking to the service desk on a regular basis so that we can be proactive in our thinking and our actions? So these are the types of tips that I think everybody should be doing today to enable their organization to not have an IT disaster. My best IT disaster recovery plan never gets used. We're arranged in such a way because of the cloud now. I mean, there's so many tools now that were not available when I first started in technology. I'm jealous, actually, because it does not cost a lot to keep your business in business safely and securely. This is about me. You can follow me on LinkedIn if you want. Please do. Let me know that you listened to this session when you send me a message. I'm a storyteller, as you can tell, and I love these types of events. And what I'd like to do now is ask you to just ask questions, really, if we have the time for that. Tessa, let me know what you thought about today. Ask questions. IT disaster recovery type thoughts in your head. Let's hear from you now.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, certainly we do have times for questions, and that was a really great presentation, actually. I think it really wraps up all the sessions from today's speakers. And what I really liked was, I've never really thought about it before, and you made me think about it today, was the service desk being the purveyor of truth. That made me think, stop and think today when you said that. And at the beginning, I do have a question. So at the beginning of the presentation, and you talked about there's no going back, there's only next. And for me, that's very much like organisations bouncing forward and not bouncing back. but actually you talked about the fact that takes culture and a change in culture, and that doesn't necessarily happen, you know, overnight. What would be your kind of tips for the audience today to kind of help them change the culture of the organization, to make them think about only what's next?
Good question. Most people are going to pick up their business continuity plan and go, because of the pandemic, this is what needs to change in that plan, pat themselves on the back and throw a party. Some people are going to go, this is the way that we work now. And because of what we've learned, this is what we're going to need going forward. And because we know that there's going to be a second wave, I mean, look at how much of the UK just got shut down.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, because we know that there's going to be a second wave, because we know that winter is coming, okay, and there's going to be more issues, we're going to have to prepare. So your baseline is trash. Throw that puppy away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to think about tomorrow, and then tomorrow you need to think about tomorrow, because there'll be a new news headline. There'll be a new regulation from the government that comes out. There'll be a new request from your customer. So your business continuity plan, if it ever gets set in concrete, that's a problem. You need to keep it as fluid and as liquid as possible.
Okay.
And the only way that you can do that is to have active discussions with the senior members of your organization, so that they're all involved in business continuity and that they all speak the culture of business continuity. And that starts setting the direction toward everybody thinking that way. Because if you see that your business leaders are doing it, then you're going to do it.
Okay, and that kind of goes back to making people clear with the vision and the why they're doing something, and you know, using and following through from the theme from lots of the presentation today. It's about the communication, absolutely, and the collaboration, I think.
Communicate with everybody that's in your organization, communicate with your vendors, communicate with your Plan B vendors, communicate with the police, fire department, regulatory agencies, risk advisors. I mean, we held events of business continuity and disaster recovery in our organization, and we invited the universe. Because it was the only way for us to stay in business.
Yeah. Okay.
I like a paycheck.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And I think that really wraps up today's session and today's experience event for our members on disaster recovery. And I'd like to thank Daniel for his presentation today. I'd like to thank you all for attending today's event, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their experiences. Thanks again to our event sponsor, Freshworks. If I could just remind you all, if you had an opportunity to take part in the survey that I mentioned earlier, supporting the digital business and the drive towards digital transformation, that would be brilliant. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to welcoming you to an SCI event sometime very soon. Thank you, take care, goodbye.